A very good morning to you. It's 7 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophy and Wilf. Good morning from me as well. Lots ahead today.
The Prime Minister sets out to defend his Chancellor after claims she misled people over the state of the economy so she could justify her tax-raising budget.
Labour MP Chilip Sadiq is sentenced to 2 years for corruption charges in a Bangladeshi court.
UK Special Forces are accused of committing war crimes in Afghanistan with allegations some soldiers had a deliberate policy to kill fighting-age men, even when they didn't pose a threat.
Also today, we're speaking to one of the world's most iconic authors, Sir Salman Rushdie, about political violence in America.
The Booker Prize-winning novelist, who was the victim of an assassination attempt, says the US has a terrifying culture of violence and guns.
Hello, good morning. Now, we've got a big speech from Keir Starmer today where he'll be trying to reclaim the budget narrative and shore up his Chancellor after claims she misled people over the state of the economy to justify tax rises. He'll say that he's setting the right economic course for Britain.
Well, the tax rises aren't generally popular, of course. This budget in particular raised £26 billion worth of them. Most of that was through freezing income tax thresholds, so more people would end up being higher taxpayers.
The Chancellor's measures also mean the overall level of taxation will hit an all-time high of 38% of national income by 2031.
Well, here's the Prime Minister and his Chancellor last week after she delivered the budget. Feels like a long time ago. From that positive tone, and Labour MPs behind them in positive tone as well, to this on Sky's Trevor Phillips programme yesterday.
I'm quoting here. For months, Reeves has lied to the public to justify record tax hikes to pay for more welfare. Did you lie?
Look, I'm a Labour Chancellor. I want to reduce child poverty. I make no apologies for that. This will be the biggest ever reduction in child poverty in a parliament ever. And I'm proud to be the Chancellor that lifts 500,000 kids out of poverty. That means kids not going to bed hungry. It means kids not waking up in cold and damp homes. And I am proud and I'm very happy to defend the choices I've made.
I just asked you, did you lie? And I have to say, the answer I was looking for was no. And
well, no.
I didn't hear the word no.
But you also asked about welfare in that question.
No, I just asked you, did you lie?
Of course I didn't.
Here with us on this. Murray, set out where that whole part of the conversation with Trevor yesterday came from.
So let's go back for a second to the end of October and take you through the timeline of basically how we got here and how Rachel Reeves has seen herself in this mess, as it were. So we start on the 31st of October. The OBR forecasts, these were the final forecasts that they were giving to the Treasury. Now, they showed the public finances had a surplus of over £4 billion, £4.2 billion. And then on the 4th of November, the Chancellor gives a dawn news conference in Downing Street, setting the stage for tax rises. She says she wants people to understand the circumstances that we are facing and that we'll all have to contribute more. Then on the 13th of November, there were headlines about a plot to oust the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. And there are reports that the Chancellor had dropped plans to raise income tax because of improved forecasts, which we now know hadn't actually changed since the 31st of October. And that put the black hole closer to 20 billion rather than 30 billion that was being pit-rolled. And then the 26th of November, the budget, taxes go up by 26 billion. And then 2 days later, the OBR publishes a letter revealing the forecast submitted to the Treasury ahead of the budget. So that is the timeline of what has happened. The difficulty for the Chancellor is really that news conference that she gave, where she gave the impression that the OBR forecasts meant she needed to find more cash and therefore taxes were going to have to go up. The difficulty is that now we can see exactly the timeline of what happened. Of course, it was a political choice. There was a world in which she didn't have to put taxes up as much, or technically at all, if she wanted to cut spending, which she didn't want to do. But the difficulty now is the Tories are, first of all, calling on her to resign. They're saying that she's misled the markets, which is why the Shadow Chancellor has written a letter to the Financial Conduct Authority about this. They're calling it a benefit street budget. And this is now why the PM is giving this speech today. And he's basically trying to defend the budget and argue that actually this needed to happen and this is a great thing. But also, we're going to cut welfare.
Yeah.
Tried that before.
We should obviously look ahead to the Prime Minister's speech that's happening this morning. But I guess my kind of main point on this is I just can't work out the politics of it all. Like, you know, most governments spend their time telling us how important the work is they're doing, how great thing is, like talking up the country. Whereas these guys seem to be almost doing the opposite, like talking it down. I'm just not sure. I don't know. It feels a bit kind of Eeyore-ish in a way.
I guess we might attempt to get a more positive tone from the PM today?
I think that's what we're expecting. I think the idea is the PM is going to essentially make the argument for the budget, why it's a good thing for the country, why it's going to grow the economy. However, we know that the OBR have explicitly said there is nothing in the budget that is going to grow the economy. And that is the difficulty. They all said it's nothing that's going to shrink the economy. But nonetheless, actually, it wasn't really a budget for growth. But he's going to try and make that argument today.
And he's also, of course, talking about welfare as well, isn't he? When, saying that actually there does need to be reform of the welfare system at a time when they just put £12 billion, obviously, into welfare as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if he's really defending the budget, so he's tying himself even closer to the Chancellor, which I think everyone assumes they're already very closely tied. So I guess that's the right tactic. I still just think now, stepping back, they've clearly made a choice twice, 2 budgets in a row. And now, more than ever, if the macro data coming forward, the economic data coming forward, GDP growth, inflation, into next year doesn't deliver, that's really when they're in the most trouble of all, because these are active choices by them to go down a particular path. You need now the economy to pick up and people to feel it, or else you kind of wear the consequences much more. But we shall see what the future holds on the economic data. And of course, the PM speaks today at 10:30.
That's it.
10:30. Gosh, I didn't have 11:30 or 10:30. Glad one of you knew. 10:30. We'll have it for you on Sky News today, of course, with Darren McCaffrey today. Now, the Labour MP, Tulip Siddique, has been sentenced to 2 years in prison in Bangladesh following corruption charges.
So the former city minister resigned earlier this year after accusations of illegally receiving a plot of land from her aunt, Sheikh Hasina, who was ousted as the country's Prime Minister last year. Our Asia correspondent, Cordelia Lynch, is in Dhaka for us. Cordy, great to have you with us this morning. What was sort of expected on this? Is 2 years a very severe punishment or not?
Good morning to you, Wilf and Sophie. This is a significant case, and Tulip Siddique faced possible life imprisonment. That is the charge that potentially she was staring down the barrel of. But the Labour MP has been sentenced to 2 years in her absence here, and also ordered to pay a fine of about £620. The judge also said that if she doesn't repay that money, a further 6 months will be added to her sentence. Now, she has always denied the charges against her. She has been found guilty of influencing her aunt, Sheikh Hasina, the former leader of Bangladesh, who was ousted last year, to try and secure a plot of land for her family members. Now, Tulip Siddique has always denied those charges. She has also accused this court of a political witch hunt. And many of her allies, ahead of the verdict this morning, said that it was a foregone conclusion. She was always going to be found guilty. But of course, this is politically uncomfortable for the former city minister who led anti-corruption in government, now found guilty herself of corruption in a Bangladeshi court. Now, she's always refuted that she is a Bangladeshi citizen, but the authorities here that they said that they found a passport, that they found documents that proved that she could be tried as a Bangladeshi citizen, and this is a result now. She faces this 2-year sentence in absentia. Now, she's very unlikely to serve that, and we haven't yet heard any reaction from her, but I expect she will be very critical. It is not, though, the end of the road for her here. She faces other outstanding charges in Bangladesh. And this is part of a much broader pattern that we've seen emerge in the last year, with the Bangladeshi authorities going after many of those close associates and family members of Sheikh Hasina, who is now in exile in India. Today, she too, alongside 16 others, was given a 5-year additional sentence last week. In this same case, Sheikh Hasina got 23 years. But look, I mean, it's a significant moment for Tulip Siddiq. 2 years for a serving politician, even if she doesn't end up serving it.
Cordelia, thank you very much indeed. Cordelia Lynch reporting for us there. And of course, we'll be talking about the story throughout the programme, including with the government minister in a few moments' time. We're talking there about the Afghanistan inquiry next, because it's published 100 pages of classified documents that relate to evidence given by an anonymous whistleblower, a senior official known only as N1466.
Well, the officer revealed that British Special Forces appeared to commit war crimes and that some members had a deliberate policy to kill fighting-age men even when they didn't pose a threat. The inquiry, now into its third year, is examining the deployment of British Special Forces between 2010 and 2013. Sadia Chowdhury has this report for us.
Last summer, a senior officer known as N1466 gave evidence to the inquiry in closed sessions. That means it was in secret. No press, no public. Today, the inquiry chair has released over 100 pages of classified documents. We've been going through them over the weekend. They point to a serious and deadly trend. N1466 told the inquiry about members of a particular Special Forces unit referred to at the inquiry as UK SF1. He said there was a deliberate policy to kill fighting-aged males regardless of whether they posed a threat. He said women and children were summarily executed, including 2 toddlers shot in their bed next to their parents. I will be clear, he told the inquiry, we're talking about war crimes. This is from an interview he gave to the Royal Military Police all the way back in 2018. UKSF-1 had gone to clear a compound, and in a room there were people hiding under a mosquito net. They did not reveal themselves, so the UKSF-1 shot at the net until there was no movement. When the net was uncovered, it was women and children. The incident, he says, was covered up, and the individual who did the shooting was allegedly given some form of award to make it look legitimate. N1466 says the Special Forces Director, or DSF, had a desire to keep it low profile, and that he'd made a conscious decision to cover up war crimes. N1466 described an attempt to investigate what happened a charade. Afghan families have accused UKSF of conducting a campaign of murder against civilians. They say senior officers and personnel at the Ministry of Defence sought to prevent adequate investigation. The MOD said it is fully committed to supporting the inquiry and added it is appropriate that we await the outcome of the inquiry's work before commenting further. N1466 says the alleged war crimes didn't help conventional forces, saying it was a stain against their sacrifice and service. This is from his transcript at the inquiry. The alleged murders are not special, not elite. It's not what we stand for. We didn't join UKSF for this sort of behaviour. Toddlers to get shot in their beds. The inquiry continues, and the chair says he'll decide on a case-by-case basis what material is to remain secret and what can be made public.
Sadia Chowdhury there for us. Now, Sir Salman Rushdie has told this programme the death of right-wing political activist Charlie Kirk is a characteristic of America's gun culture. The novelist also spoke about the assassination attempts on his life and on President Trump. You've spoken before about how close you were to losing your life, something that I think as time passed, you realised even more how close you were and your heart stopped beating. In light of all that, I wondered if I could ask what your reaction was, your sentiment was when you saw the news of Charlie Kirk's assassination.
I'm not in favour of people being murdered. So, I thought what everybody thought, which is that it was an appalling act of violence. But it seems to me to be a characteristic or a consequence, let's say, of America's terrifying gun culture.
Similarly, when you saw the news of President Trump's unsuccessful assassination attempt, did you have sympathy for him? What was your sentiment there?
again, I guess I'm happy. I'm happy that it failed. Beyond that, I don't have a lot to say about it.
Do you think that when you look at some of the responses to those examples that we saw, I mean, President Trump, for example, said openly that he felt God saved him. Do you think, how do you react to that, how religion is used in that way, or do you believe that to be true?
President Trump, I don't think has ever had a very close relationship with God. So I take that with a pinch of salt.
It's so interesting because there have been a few interviews with Sir Salman Rushdie recently about his new book, but I haven't seen any where he talks about US gun culture in that way. And obviously it has such resonance coming from somebody who had that attempt on his own life, and obviously it lives under a cloud of gun culture, right?
Yeah, and do you know what, actually, the next bit to come was perhaps the most interesting of that part, because I pressed him on religion, and he's been open as well and critical in the past about his beliefs on religion, but I never heard him frame it as he did, which was to say, I think I came close to that moment and I didn't see heaven or hell. You know, my heart stopped. The moment of death.
Yeah.
And I thought it was just a very interesting way to articulate why he doesn't believe in God.
Yeah.
And it came off the back of that exchange. There was lots of great stuff. We talk about AI. Actually, he's not that worried about AI.
That's a relief.
He's also, we had this debate
news.
about should you read books. I read on a Kindle. Sophie reads the hard copies. I'm afraid he switched. He used to read hard copies. He now reads Kindle.
I mean, I'm not.
The Sir Salman Rushdie likes the backlit screen.
I love it. I'm not a massive purist on it.
No, I know you're not.
I prefer the old paper copy.
I assumed he would.
Generally.
I assumed he would, but
Love
no. So we talk a bit about that. We talk about the UK as well and free speech. And on that, he thinks we do have free speech, but he thinks we've slightly lost our way. So really interesting stuff to come.
It sounds so interesting. You can watch the full interview right here on Mornings. It's going to be later on in the programme as well, but obviously it's online now. Can't wait for that, or if you're going out.
Don't tell them to tune out from this.
Well, some people have got jobs to go to,
just
kids to get to school.
Stick on Sky News, whatever you do. The Southeast Asia flooding now, and rescue efforts are continuing after extensive floods hit Indonesia last week, killing several hundred people and displacing hundreds of thousands whose homes have been damaged or swept away.
Indonesian authorities are now reporting that some people living on the island of Sumatra have resorted to stealing food and also water to survive. I mean, you can see that absolute devastation going on there, the floods that you can see in Indonesia.
And this, of course, comes from the exceptionally rare tropical storm cyclone Senyar, which came in from last week, and it's affected Thailand, Malaysia, Philippines, Sri Lanka. Millions of people have been displaced cumulatively across those countries. 900 dead and counting across all of Southeast Asia over the last month, whereas in Indonesia itself, 400 or so have died in the last week or so.
We'll bring you more, of course, on that story in Indonesia, really from rescue teams, really struggling, of course, to get aid to the people who need it because of those blocked roads. In the meantime, though, let's talk the UK politics, shall we? We've got a big speech by Keir Starmer today. It's at 10:30 this morning. And it's interesting because I think it is, it's notable, I think is the word that I'd use, that the Keir Starmer has decided to give this big pitch-rolling speech so soon after the budget. It's pretty clear that there are messages that he wants to punch through that he doesn't think have been punched through already on growth, and also, of course, on cost of living, but on welfare too, because I think that there is a feeling that this narrative that it was a tax-raising budget in order to fund welfare is one the government is pretty anxious about as well. So an awful lot to talk to with somebody I think who is uniquely well-placed to talk about it, actually. That is Darren Jones, the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister. He was working very, very closely with Rachel Reeves, who was her number 2, so he knows exactly what's going on in the Treasury until he switched sides and went over to number 10 to be Keir Starmer's right-hand man. Let's have a listen to what he has to say. Thank you very much for being on the programme. Lots to get through, but I did just want to get your reaction to the breaking news first that we've had through this morning. Tulip Siddiq, Labour MP, sentenced to 2 years in absentia in Bangladesh. Now, this is She's accused of obtaining plots of land through her aunt, a former Prime Minister, through what they're calling an abuse of power and influence. What's your reaction to that?
Julep has made it very clear that she denies any wrongdoing whatsoever. She's tried to engage, as I understand, with this process in Bangladesh unsuccessfully, and so she's concluded it's a kind of more of a political operation than a legal one. She was obviously not as part of that trial or court process in Bangladesh, and they concluded innocence or otherwise without her. So Julep will have to comment more on the detail, but my understanding is that she refutes any accusations.
And the government backing her on that. Right, let's talk about the budget fallout, if we may. So Rachel Reeves told the public, and even members of her own cabinet, that there was a black hole when the Office of Budget Responsibility, the kind of fiscal watchdog, if you like, said that there was actually a surplus. Do you feel misled by her?
No, not in the slightest, because OBR does about 5 cycles in the run-up to a budget. The number moves around. You don't actually know the final number until the very end of the process. And all that process does is talks about how much money they think you might have coming in that you've not already allocated. That's before you get to headroom. That's the amount of money you put aside for a rainy day. The Chancellor was very clear we needed more than we've had in the past, so she took it from 10 billion to over 20 billion pounds. That means that if there's a shock in the future, we have more cash put aside to be able to respond to it. And then there were things that the government decided it wanted to do, like paying for some of the levies on energy bills so that you could reduce energy bills and move it into taxation. So when you add all of these numbers up in what's called the scorecard, it's basically a big spreadsheet, the Chancellor was right all the way through that we needed to raise more money than was available through coming in through the OBR forecasts.
But, she said there was a big black hole. The Institute for Fiscal Studies is saying, even after accounting for the policy U-turn since the spring, it would have been a very small deficit. It certainly could have been worse for the Chancellor. The Times reporting she misled Cabinet on November the 4th. According to the paper, she convinced Cabinet that the economic outlook was so bad she needed to put up income tax. I mean, you must have been at that meeting. Can you kind of clear it up for us?
Well, first thing to say, obviously, health warning, we don't disclose minutes of cabinet meetings, but look,
a ship sailed.
But look, the Chancellor didn't say anything of the kind. The budget was the budget which was delivered on the 26th of November. But as I say, she had to raise more money because, first of all, we needed the headroom.
I mean, that's a choice, though, isn't it?
It's absolutely a choice, but it's totally the right choice.
Like, people say that's the right choice, and she's got a lot of credit for it.
Yeah.
But that was a choice.
Yeah, of course.
Rather than being forced into doing it.
But look, if the Chancellor had come out with only £4 billion of headroom, normally you get to maybe between 20 and 30 billion pounds in a budget. Everyone would have been going totally mad. I mean, and all of the opposition parties need to answer that question as well. Do they really think that £4 billion of unallocated money over the course of a 5-year period is sufficiently robust for the UK economy? Of course the answer is no.
The thing that gets me right is, most governments spend their time telling us how great everything is when they're in charge. I mean, you guys seem to have taken the pretty unique position of just consistently telling us how terrible it all is.
Well, look,
kind of talking down the economy.
Well, no, we're being honest about the challenges the country faces. For too many years under the Conservatives, they told you they could afford to cut national insurance. They promised things like the infected blood scandal, but didn't put any money aside for it. They basically just tried to bide time until someone found out, but actually they lost the election and ran away. We're just presenting the facts as we have them and taking the decisions we need to do to deal with them.
Keir Starmer was making a speech today. What's his message?
Well, the key thing about Keir's speech today is this budget sets the foundation for our focus on economic growth. He'll be talking about how we're going to be changing regulation to make it easier and quicker to build things. You might have seen a report last week from the budget about how we've gold-plated a lot of regulation on energy infrastructure, in particular nuclear, and he's going to be tasking the business secretary to be able to speed those types of decisions up.
What's he saying on growth, then?
Well, the key thing is that it takes too long to build things, and so we need to make it quicker. We've already put significant investment, public investment behind capital infrastructure. We've made it easier for private sector businesses to invest in it, but still it takes too long. And even though we're just finishing off our planning bill, there's a lot more to do, and that's what the Prime Minister will be talking about today.
Because it feels, the growth forecast is something that I think, we can have a look at the Office of Budget Responsibility charts, because it is pretty gloomy still. I mean, and also the whole thing, the point here is the kind of downgrade. So the kind of yellow lines are where the OBR had expected growth to be. The blue lines are the kind of revised ones. I accept that it's gone up in 2024, but since then it doesn't look like your government's having a very good impact on growth, does it?
Well, look, these are forecasts, these are guesses about the future. In a very challenging world, this rate of growth is actually pretty standard amongst the G7, the 7 wealthiest nations in the world, and we're still performing as one of the best. I think we're the second best in the 7 wealthiest nations in the world. So,
but there has been a downgrade, hasn't there, in all the years other than 2024?
There's been a little downgrade in the forecast, but if you look at 2025, as the Chancellor said, we beat the forecast, and she was very clear that the ambition of this government is to beat the forecast in 2026, 2027 and 2028.
Okay,
and
find out how that happens.
Well. I'll come back each year, we can have a look at the graph.
Keir Starmer is also talking a lot about welfare, right? So he's saying we must also reform the welfare state itself. That is what renewal demands. I'm slightly confused in that, you just spent an extra £12 billion on welfare in the budget. If something's failing, why are you giving it more money?
Well, there's different pockets of the welfare budget. The biggest bit of the welfare budget is, of course, the state pension, that's protected by the triple lock to pensioners. We're obviously committed to the triple lock, but that's where the bulk of this increase in money goes to, because we've got an ageing population. And we've already made changes at the budget to welfare as well. You can't get luxury cars anymore on Motability, just standard cars like everyone else.
The extra £12 billion is not just on the state pension, though, is it? That's also some of the other money that you're putting into welfare as well.
For sure. So with the choices we've made, for example, on child poverty, where we've taken a proactive choice to take historic levels of investment to eradicating child poverty in our country. These are things that we want to do, and so we have to set out how we're going to pay for them. But the Prime Minister's right, there are other areas of welfare, especially for younger people coming out of school, often with mental health challenges, who are getting stuck on benefits and not being helped back into work or training, where we have to do more.
Are there some people who are claiming benefits who shouldn't be?
I'm sure there always is. I mean, there's always a bit of fraud and error in the system, as we call it. We have to take a lot of work to make sure that people genuinely need the benefits they're claiming,
but not just
in a
fraud,
very tiny
but people
percentage.
who, have anxiety, for example. You're talking there about young people with mental health issues. Are there people who shouldn't be claiming welfare but are?
Well, they're entitled to claim welfare right now, but the key point is they need to get the help they need to get better and to get back into training or to work, because they presumably do not want to spend their lives on benefits when they can earn more in the private sector.
I guess the thing that I kind of can't quite escape is I'm struggling to understand, the kind of what the government stands for, if I'm being completely honest. So, you decide to give £12 billion to welfare, then Keir Starmer gives a speech saying welfare spending, is too high. You say how great it is that you're scrapping the two-child benefit cap, but then last year you suspended the whip from MPs who voted to scrap it. You want to raise income tax, and then you don't want to raise income tax. I mean, what's going on? It doesn't really feel like conviction politics, does it?
Look, all of this is about making sure you're taking adult decisions about the economy. Take the two-child cap. It wasn't a manifesto commitment because at that time we didn't think we were able to afford to pay for it. In this budget, the Chancellor set out how we were going to afford to take that action, and so we've taken that action. That's perfectly fine. And then on the other issues that you mentioned, it is right, there are areas of welfare spending, including in the overall bucket of welfare spending, where we need to modernise the system. But that doesn't mean that we're not going to be there when people genuinely need our help. And that's why we're going to continue to invest in those areas of spending in the appropriate way.
OK, thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.
Darren Jones there, the warm-up act for the Prime Minister later on. Coming up on the programme today, what it's really like to be on the front line of journalism in some of the world's most hostile environments. We're going to be talking to our very own special correspondent, Alex Crawford, about our new series, Hotspots.
What might happen if Russia attacked the UK?
This is clearly an enormous show of force.
It is definitely out of the ordinary.
We ran a war game with former ministers back in the hot seat.
Ben Wallace.
Amber Rudd.
Jack Straw.
It's the kind of war game that's genuinely tested inside government.
The Russians are signalling that there may be an attack.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? I'm Deborah Haynes. From Sky News and Tortoise, this is The War Game. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Welcome back. The news this morning. Keir Starmer will use a speech later to defend the budget and back his Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, who is continuing to battle these accusations she deliberately misled the public by painting an overly gloomy picture of the economy to justify tax rises.
Labour MP Tulip Siddiq has been sentenced to 2 years in prison in Bangladesh following corruption charges. The former minister resigned earlier this year after accusations of illegally receiving a plot of land from her aunt, Sheikh Hasina, who was the ousted Prime Minister last year.
A whistleblower claims UK Special Forces committed war crimes while they were stationed in Afghanistan. The soldier gave evidence to an inquiry anonymously and also said senior members of the army knew what was happening but didn't act.
Now, we've got a shocking and tragic story to bring you throughout the day here on Sky News. It's a story of a young man called Benjamin who last August killed his mother and injured his father and sister in a knife attack as he was dealing with undiagnosed schizophrenia.
So Benjamin was experiencing hallucinations. He felt that he was being controlled, and his father, Joseph, has spoken to our colleague Shingi Moriki and told him that he mistook his son's mental health symptoms for a spiritual struggle. So we'll hear more about the details of this from Shingi in a moment, but a warning that this interview, of course, contains distressing content.
I thought I was the first person he was attacking. So I was pleading with him not to kill me because he knows how much I love him. And I was lying on the floor and he wasn't giving in. Then a neighbor, she came out. I saw her. And she was shouting at him, "Stop, Ben, stop, don't do that to your daddy, don't do that to your daddy." Then that was all I heard. And then I passed out.
Well, Shingi's here with us. He did that interview and his full report is available online. Expand for us, Shingi, a bit more on the extraordinary circumstances and the tragedy of this case.
So what you just heard there was Joshua Obernim talking about the day his son, Benjamin, who he loved and still deeply loves, came to the home. He had paranoid schizophrenia, which is undiagnosed, and he attacked the family in a knife attack. And Joshua is very lucky to be alive. He had multiple injuries, and he spoke about that, and he sees it as a testimony that he's still here. But there's a deeper context to this story. So as Benjamin got unwell, or as his symptoms began to show, the family saw them as purely spiritual. They tried to pray together as a family. And in that interview, the full interview, he talks about how he didn't even know what schizophrenia was. And that, for me, raised further issues. And we looked into those, we delved into those and looked at how people from deeply religious backgrounds and cultures sometimes see these things as spiritual issues. So we've spoken to experts, including psychiatrists, as well as a pastor, to try and just dig deeper and look at how, for some communities, praying harder is seen as the answer, whereas actually raising awareness of the fact that these illnesses are real and they exist is something that Joshua wanted to do by talking. But he also wanted to make one point clear, which was extraordinary, which is he still forgives his son despite everything that's happened.
That's absolutely, yeah. I mean, that it just stays with you, the fact that, that he still has that love for his son, despite what happens. I guess that is a tragedy of it all. Shingi, thank you very much. We're going to have more from Shingi throughout the programme. In the meantime, we can talk to Ray Waddingham, who is the chair of the English Hearing Voices Network, who joins us now from Leicestershire. Thank you for being with us. Firstly, can you just talk to us for a moment about schizophrenia? I believe that you've struggled with it yourself. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about what it is. Can you just talk us through the reality of it?
So what gets called schizophrenia, for me at least, is lots of unusual experiences. I hear voices that talk about me, what I'm doing, that narrate my life. I see visions. I have times when I have really unusual beliefs, like the belief of being controlled, which has been talked about already. It affects everybody differently. And what I think is really important is to recognise that these experiences can be incredibly meaningful and be metaphorical. There can be sense in them, even if they sound very unusual and can have, as in this tragic story, really scary outcomes. Those scary outcomes are really rare. And if we can get people the help they need, then people can start to take choices and navigate their voices and navigate their unusual experiences without hurting themselves or hurting anyone else.
What does help look like for someone who suffers from schizophrenia? What are the kind of solutions, as it were?
There's a few different things that can be really, really valuable. I think for some people, spirituality can be part of that, prayer and faith, but it needs to come alongside mental health support as well. There's an increasing amount of interest, I think, in this approach called open dialogue, which is ideally placed to work with people alongside their beliefs and their faith communities. We're currently awaiting the largest trial of mental health models of care that's going to be published in December or January, and it's looking really effective. So rather than there being mental health care over here and spirituality over here, we can actually work alongside people. And then peer support, actually working with people who have gone through things like myself. As part of the Hearing Voices Network, we have a number of groups where people can come together and share their experiences and learn that you can say no to voices and that you can find meaning in these unusual beliefs and take control.
It's interesting to hear you there. You talked there about finding meaning in some of the experiences, and I guess is that why there is this, what Shingi was talking about, this kind of risk, particularly when people believe that it is a kind of religious experience, when sometimes it can feel meaningful, but obviously if you take that too far, then you have a situation where people are praying rather than finding the help that is needed and missing some of those dangerous warning signs as well.
I think there's a difference between finding meaning and taking things literally as true. So, for example, I believed that someone was controlling my body and my mind and making me do things. If I took that literally, then that would be really worrying. But instead, I realised that I felt disempowered through bullying as a child and lots of things that have happened to me in my life. A lot of people who struggle with things that get called schizophrenia have gone through bullying or traumatic events in their life, racism, and it can kind of show itself in these beliefs. So by meaning, I don't mean literal, like fact. It's more symbolic meaning.
Ray, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. We're going to continue discussing this story throughout the day on Sky News. Shingi will be back later on as well, and you can watch Shingi's full report on the Sky News website already.
Now, Sky News is taking you behind the scenes into some of the world's most hostile environments with the return of our show, Hotspots. From dodging gunfire in Syria to navigating gang-controlled streets in Haiti, the series shines a light on how our correspondents, Stuart Ramsey and Alex Crawford, carry out some of the most hard-hitting journalism in the world.
Let's go. Watch way, right? We're going to get in. Right. Get in.
We just want to ask you a few questions about your involvement with ISIS. Next step for them quite often is getting on a boat and sailing illegally over into Europe.
Es un solo procesamiento, una sola sacada.
Oh my goodness. Whoa! Oh my goodness! If you weren't affected, you'd be a bit of a strange person.
Turn off the camera. Turn around and go away.
Oh, well, I'm very pleased to say that our special correspondent Alex Crawford is here with us now. It's always such a pleasure to have you when you are back in the UK, because obviously, as Hotspot shows, you spend most of your time travelling the world, going to some of the most hostile, literally, environments. And just talk to us about the idea behind Hotspots.
So I think the difference with what we're doing now, which is pretty exciting and all down to our incredibly creative and talented colleague Laura Scott, we're putting it on YouTube, and we've got our own channel, YouTube Hotspots. And it's basically, I think in this era where everyone's doubting everything, they don't know whether I'm telling the truth, you're telling the truth, the politicians are telling the truth, or actually what we're showing them is the truth. I think this is an effort to show raw footage, unvarnished reality, no commentary, you just make your own mind up. And, some of it's pretty crazy. I think my editor's heart skipped a beat when he saw the footage coming in, because it is just unravelling in front of us, and we're just trying to show it as it is, and the viewer makes up their own minds.
I know that the overriding, the sole aim for you and for Stuart is always to deliver the full story first, and what you do is just an incredibly brave aspect of delivering the full story first. But it also, I mean, you watch the footage that's already out there, and I know there's going to be so much more to come. It kind of comes across like a movie. I mean, it's tremendously exciting, it's tremendously dangerous, and we do get a behind-the-scenes look at what you do from day to day, which is unlike almost anything else in the world of journalism.
I mean, let's be clear, we feel like it's an absolute privilege to be in this position. It is so... we feel incredibly responsible to produce the correct story, as all of our colleagues do at Sky News. The thing that's different about this, I guess, is that we're trying to show you how we do it, rather than also what the story's about and the facts, all the key political facts behind it. It's what everyone goes through in order to get the reality, to get the raw, honest truth. And you get a chance to also see the people who are normally behind the cameras, which is like my producer, Chris Cunningham, my cameraman, Garwin McCluckey, who's an absolute, titan in his field. You see what we're going through on the ground. And I remember showing the first bit to one of my daughters, and she said, "Oh my God, is this your idea of a bedtime story?" Watching my mother nearly getting killed. But also she felt, and she's a sort of Gen X, she thought, she actually said, which kind of threw us a little bit, this is better than the actual real report, because you get to see what is happening. And we're finding it out at the same time as the viewer is finding it out.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think there's such a key thing about the kind of not being edited, not being curated, which is in itself an editing process, deciding which bits the audience should see. You can just see it. I was going to ask, is there anywhere that you would kind of pick, because it's all about different places you've been. Is there a particular place that you've been recently, perhaps, or that someone might be able to see on Hotspots that has just stayed with you for whatever reason?
I mean, every to be honest, this might sound like a cliche, but cliches are because they're true. Every little story stays with you a little bit, because you go through so much to get it. Syria is one of the most recent, and it's a place where myself and my crew have spent covering more than a decade. So when you go in and you see dozens and dozens of dead bodies, and some of them are left in the garden of the hospital, and people are still picking it up, and they're incredibly distraught and traumatised, it would be very odd if it didn't stay with you. You take a bit of it away every time you go.
And the knowledge of the history of what they've been through, and even now it's still...
unravelling, yeah.
Is there anywhere you haven't got access to yet that you want to get access to?
Gaza. That is the key place for more than 2 years, which we have not, as foreign journalists, have not been allowed in, and we've had to rely on our Palestinian colleagues who have been undermined and derided and belittled and accused of being terrorists and for the best part of 2 years. And that is still my lifetime ambition, to get into Gaza at some stage again, because obviously I've been before, as many other foreign journalists have, but Israel has imposed a blanket ban on unfettered, independent access, and I think that does us all as journalists, a huge disservice, not just to journalists but to the wider world.
Well, congrats on this new spin-off series, Hotspots. It's available, as Alex has said, on YouTube now, and well worth checking out.
And we look
it's always a pleasure.
We look forward to seeing your coverage of Gaza on it as well. Thank you.
Sophy.
Now the countdown's officially on to the 25th of December. Should we just say Christmas?
I think we can say
Specify
Christmas.
the date?
But is your Christmas lights game as good as our next guest? We're going to be finding out.
I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent.
An enormous explosion has just come down. I think it was a monster just landed in between us.
Hundreds and hundreds of people hoping to get north, ultimately to get to the United States.
It's a border where they're not welcome, yet they keep coming.
We saw snatch squads going in, grabbing people, taking them out and putting them into trucks and taking them away.
They make about 50 kilos of fentanyl a week. It's incredibly dangerous and toxic stuff.
There's been an upsurge in deaths. The fighting between the gangs is getting more and more vicious.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah.
The battlefield is outside the barricades, which is over there. This is much more like a normal town.
It's really sending a clear message that Venezuela is eager for change.
We're being crushed. Free from wherever you get your news. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. This is real, hardcore emergency medicine. The information on this could bring down the entire network, not just in Iraq and Syria, but across the world. Sky News, the full story first.
Well, hundreds of thousands of people have been using the beast for years to traverse Mexico, but it is really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back, Jackie's here. I'm delighted to say so we can look back on all of the weekend sport and the Formula One. Oh my God. I mean,
Yeah.
it shouldn't be as nail-biting. It's because
No,
we've got
it
one race
shouldn't.
left now.
One race left, Abu Dhabi, next weekend. For the first time since 2010, there's going to be 3 options of who could win it. There's like a proper race, which, you know, we thought for this weekend, Lando Norris was nailed on to win it, 24 points ahead. What could possibly go wrong? Well, it turns out your team can get the strategy catastrophically wrong. And that has really cost McLaren because they should have pitted when there was a crash on lap 7. The safety car came out and they should have pitted then. Everybody else pitted then. And the reason that's important was because on this track, it's 57 laps. This happened at lap 7. You are only allowed to use your tyres for 25 laps, and then you've got to change them. It's a safety thing, and that's the rule. So they thought, right, OK, if we all pit now, we race for 25, then we have another pit, then we race for 25. But McLaren didn't do that. They just thought we'll keep our track position or we'll keep the flexibility for later. And as it turned out, it allowed Max Verstappen then to go on and win that Grand Prix. And it really should have been Oscar Piastri, who was the fastest all weekend, who was on pole position. It really should have been his race to win. And at the end, he didn't say anything. And then he just went speechless.
He must be annoyed.
He was
furious.
Absolutely furious.
But this also comes the weekend before. McLaren made a mistake as well. So a couple of weekends in a row, they should have locked this up.
Yeah, so the weekend before, they lost all their points because of a technicality of some wearing under the car. Horrible miscalculation, like really horrible. I mean, you can imagine what's going to be going on in that garage today, going through, like, why did we do that? Whose decision was it? Blah, blah, blah. But anyway, the situation is Norris, 12 points clear on 408 points. He's still in the driving seat, but you just feel that literally, he's still in the driving seat.
Like it.
But the pressure on him now, because it was so much more comfortable, and now it's really sort of squeaky bum tie, right?
Well, good for spectators, though, right?
Can I just say,
want a bit of competition,
we've got
surely?
Zach Brown, the head of McLaren, coming on the day after the race next week, so it's going to change the tone of that interview.
That could go either way, right?
Please come on if you're watching, by the way.
Yeah. No, you got to. He said he would now. Verstappen, 396 points. Piastri, 392 points. They've all got 7 race wins each. No one thought it'd be this close. Verstappen's, 4-time world champion. You've got to say that he's with a great chance of doing it again. But the situation is, if Lando Norris finishes third, even if Verstappen wins next weekend, he is the world champion.
Yeah. Respect to Verstappen, because obviously he's showing his quality in the back half of the season again.
He's fighting for it.
He's fighting
tooth and nail,
but I guess, I don't know if Lando as the Brit, one hopes comes through.
And also for a first world title, it just, for a change.
Yeah, for a change, exactly.
It's good that someone doesn't totally dominate, but, you got to say Max Verstappen is the best driver on that grid. And he did say, if I had their car, I would have won this ages ago.
Is that what he said?
Yeah.
I love that. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, talk about that for confidence.
I love it.
Just get in their heads. Totally. I mean, we could talk about fighting. Maybe Arsenal should have fought a little bit more in that Chelsea derby yesterday.
Let's talk about football, shall we? Because look, it feels, doesn't it, that the season is gearing up for a kind of Arsenal coronation. But
I think it's too soon to say
that.
They
were held, weren't they, at Chelsea?
Yeah, they were held by Chelsea. And what kind of makes that, I suppose, harder to swallow for Mikel Arteta, who seemed quite irritated at the end of that match, was that Chelsea were down to 10 men for quite a large portion of that match when Moises Caicedo did that tackle that you've just seen on Mikel Merino on 38 minutes. So they're down to 10 men and Arsenal just cannot make it count. It was really attritional, physical, feisty. I think the Arsenal players are waking up with tons of bruises this morning. It was that kind of really intense match. And bizarrely, it was the 10-man Chelsea that opened the scoring first through Trevor Chalobah on 38 minutes. The equaliser did come, as you kind of knew it would. Mikel Merino with the goal on 59 minutes. But there weren't that many clear-cut chances.
I don't think Arsenal deserved it. I mean, Chelsea played
well. Yeah, afterwards, Enzo Maresca said, we were better. And he was right.
Yeah,
they were better.
And clearly when Chelsea down to 10, you would have liked 3 points as an Arsenal fan. But to be honest, coming into it, they're second. A draw away from home is not bad. I'm slightly surprised how negative sort of Arteta and co were.
They felt like they'd lost it. That was.
Well, we went 1-0 down. I'd take it. I'd take the point.
Can I talk very briefly about Sunderland? We don't actually have pictures of this, right? But I just want to talk about Sunderland because I think this is one of the classic games where you've got a team like Sunderland. They've been through the absolute ringer over years and years, and now they've come back and they had that thriller against Bournemouth, went 2-0 down, came back 1-3-0. I just love these stories of these kind of sleeping giant clubs, really, really great fan base, really well supported, and they've had an amazing season.
Really good fan base. And actually, you sort of feared the worst in that match because they were down in the match against Bournemouth, and Bournemouth, are quite tough customers these days as well. And, we were looking at that score and going, in our house going, I think the Sunderland bubble might have popped.
Yeah, exactly.
They've had their moment at the top, and now there's only one way they're going to go. But no, turned it around, and in the European places, and deservedly so. And I don't think anybody will want to go to the Stadium of Lights.
No, it's true. We're going to do a little... So nice to see
Stadium
you,
of
as
Lights,
always.
Stadium of Light to Lights.
To lights. Jackie sent one of her pictures in. I don't know if we've got it this time, but we're going to try and get it in. Jackie's tree is up. It is officially December, so that means it's OK to start getting your Christmas lights up. And we just want to show you how one man in Bristol has just taken festive decorating to a whole new level.
Blimey.
No. Maybe it's that 150 quid off his energy bill.
Hold on.
Budgets that's done it, so I'm going to go for it.
Do you know how many lights there are? Oh, and now it's just put it up on screen. I was going to quiz you. 235,000 lights.
235,000 lights?
See, you wouldn't have guessed that. Guys, I was really looking forward to that.
That is exciting.
Anyway.
It's all to raise money, I should say, for the taxi charity for military veterans. So absolutely fair play to him as well. Send in your lights. It's the 1st of December, which means we can fully embrace Christmas now. mornings@sky.uk. I got a little tweet a message on X, I should say, from Dave Whitmore, who is in Stoke-on-Trent. He sent us this picture of his Christmas tree. Love it, Dave. Thank you for bringing it to us. It's a very, very rainy day. Apparently, we're getting like a month's worth of rain in 24 hours. So we're keen to brighten it up with a couple of pictures.
Send them in. We'll bring those pictures throughout the rest of the programme. We'll be back after this short break with all of the day's top stories building up to that speech from the Prime Minister. Don't go anywhere.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
Hello, good morning. It is 8 o'clock and welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophie and Wilf, a very good morning from me as well. Lots ahead.
The Prime Minister sets out to defend his Chancellor after claims she misled people over the state of the economy so she could justify her tax-raising budget.
Labour MP Tulip Siddiq is sentenced to 2 years for corruption charges in a Bangladeshi court.
UK Special Forces are accused of committing war crimes in Afghanistan, with allegations some soldiers had a deliberate policy to kill fighting-age men, even when they didn't pose a threat.
Also today, we're speaking to one of the world's most iconic authors, Sir Salman Rushdie, about political violence in America.
The Booker Prize-winning novelist, who was the victim of an assassination attempt, says the US has a terrifying culture of violence and guns.
Very good morning to you. We've got a big speech from the Prime Minister today, where we'll be trying to reclaim, he'll be trying to reclaim the budget narrative and shore up his Chancellor after claims she misled people over the state of the economy to justify tax raises. The Prime Minister will say that he's setting the right economic course for Britain.
Tax rises, of course, aren't generally popular, and this budget raised them by £26 billion. Now, most of that was because of the decision to freeze income tax thresholds, which basically means more people end up paying more tax because they're higher rate taxpayers.
Well, the Chancellor's measures will mean the overall level of taxation will hit an all-time high of 38% of national income by 2031. Here's the Prime Minister and his Chancellor last week after delivering the budget, feeling quite a long time ago.
Those are Labour choices, promised and delivered by this budget, promised and delivered by this Labour government. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, I commend this statement to the House.
Well, from that, with, of course, kind of the congratulatory slaps on the back, to this on Sky's Trevor Phillips programme at the weekend.
I'm quoting here. For months, Reeves has lied to the public to justify record tax hikes to pay for more welfare. Did you lie?
Look, I'm a Labour Chancellor. I want to reduce child poverty. I make no apologies for that. This will be the biggest ever reduction in child poverty in a parliament ever. And I'm proud to be the Chancellor that lifts 500,000 kids out of poverty. That means kids not going to bed hungry. It means kids not waking up in cold and damp homes. And I am proud, and I'm very happy to defend the choices I've made.
I just asked you, did you lie? And I have to say, the answer I was looking for was no. And
well, no.
I didn't hear the word no.
But you also asked about welfare in that question.
No, I just asked you, did you lie?
Of course I didn't.
Let's talk to Murray. Never great when you have to say, of course I didn't lie, in the interview after the budget. But Murray, we've got Keir Starmer. He's doing a speech today. I guess it's to try and reset the narrative of the budget a bit.
Yeah, so he is trying to defend his budget. Bit of a fight back, and that's basically because it's been so heavily criticised for, as you were just outlining, several reasons. So he's going to talk about how it was a budget to reduce the cost of living and then cite some of the examples. He's going to talk about how it ensured economic stability and also protected investment and public services specifically, and those elements helping growth in the UK. And what he's going to say is, actually, this budget was a good thing. This is all the things it's going to do. This is how it's going to make your life better. Because some of the negativity around the narrative over the past few days since the budget is probably quite frustrating for Number 10. And also, he's also going to talk about trying to reduce welfare. Now, this is fascinating because, first of all, he tried that and failed when the backbenchers weren't having any of it. And it was a bit of a humiliating U-turn, which cost him about £5 billion. But also, he's going to talk about how we've got to confront the reality that our welfare state is trapping people not just in poverty, but out of work. And he's going to essentially do what we saw about 6 months ago, which is make the moral argument for cutting welfare.
I thought they just put it up. Literally last week.
Exactly. So they promised to cut it, they didn't cut it. Then they actually increased it, and about a third of the tax rises that we saw are going straight on welfare. And so that is quite an uncomfortable position to be in, where you've just put benefits and welfare up while then within less than a week you're saying we're going to cut welfare. So you can forgive certain people for perhaps not believing them, that they are actually going to follow through.
I think what's really interesting in this is the extent to which, not to always bring it back to this, the markets believe them. Because kudos to the government, they have achieved a calm market environment since the budget, which was definitely not a given. But that doesn't mean it's going to last, for the weeks and months ahead. And I think one of the key areas the markets will be looking at is it a never-ending increase in welfare spending? Will that be required next year as well, or is there a cap on it? And I think here you juxtapose that chirpy, positive mood that we had from John McDonnell sitting here the morning after the budget.
He was happy.
Hinting at, oh, yeah, we've won on this, are we going to win on something else? Versus what the Prime Minister articulates today about long-term aims to cap welfare spending and the reaction to it. And I actually do think bond markets and investors will be looking at this quite closely going forward.
I think you're right. And I think also people have said that the direction of travel from Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer because of this budget looks like it's going slightly more left, being slightly pulled by their backbenchers and by their members. And that has raised some eyebrows because it's not necessarily what they sold to people during a general election campaign. So this is an opportunity for Keir Starmer, to an extent, to actually try and say, hold on a second, no, we're not getting dragged to the left by our backbenchers. We can still be a bit more centre-left in some of our fiscal policy. But the difficulty is it's always good talking about it, but what do they actually do?
The other thing which we're told he's going to do today is intervene on the cost of living crisis, which I'm fascinated exactly what he does say on this, because I'm sure what they want to do, as you said, is recapture the narrative and let people know it's not all about this debate of misleading or not misleading and Westminster details. Oh, look, we're giving you an extra 150 quid for your energy bills next year. They want people to hear that. That's actually different, though, from saying we're tackling inflation. And this is a big question, I think, again, a lot of economists have going forward, is was this budget something that will reduce inflation? It probably won't increase inflation like last year's budget did, which is a fact. But will it actually reduce it? And I think, again, I come back to what I said last hour. We'll know the answer in 6 months' time as we approach the May elections. Has this budget improved GDP growth? Has it reduced inflation? Remains to be seen. But a speech itself can't achieve that.
I think the other thing that's a big concern for Labour and something they will be keeping their eye on is if you look at the polling about who the public trusts the most on the economy, it's now the Conservatives. And that was something that the Conservatives had lost and Labour were doing really well on.
I've been quite interested in the Conservative polling, right? It's been interesting because, look, the received wisdom is that they're dead and buried, they're finished, it's existential, and don't get me wrong, it's still pretty catastrophic. But they've stabilised. Totally. They have stabilised and even ticked up a little bit.
No longer falling. Woohoo!
No, but genuinely, there's.
No, I know what you
mean. I think it's one to keep an eye on.
I think the Conservative Party's success potentially is massively underpriced.
Yeah, I think that too.
I was speaking to a Labour loyalist, kind of more right-wing, as it were, more kind of Keir Starmer, Shabana Mahmood camp, let's say. And they said they are really worried about the Tories because they think that at some point the prospect of reform, the prospect of the Greens might seem a little bit too risky, a little bit too chaotic. And then suddenly they'll want somebody sensible. And that's when the Tories could come back.
It's the economic credibility thing that they're trying to make hay on. Look, it's a long way back, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that they're having a brilliant time. But yeah, I've been noticing it as well. It's interesting. Thanks, Mari, very much indeed.
Now, the Labour MP Tulip Siddiq has been sentenced to 2 years in prison in Bangladesh following corruption charges.
So she's the former city minister, but she resigned earlier this year. This is after these accusations of illegally receiving a plot of land from her aunt, Sheikh Hasina, who was ousted as the country's prime minister last year.
Well, Tulip Siddiq has released a statement following the sentencing. She says, "This whole process has been flawed and farcical from the beginning to the end. The outcome of this kangaroo court is as predictable as it is unjustified. I hope this so-called verdict will be treated with the contempt it deserves."
She goes on to say, my focus has always been my constituents in Hampstead and Highgate, and I refuse to be distracted by the dirty politics of Bangladesh.
Well, our Asia correspondent, Cordelia Lynch, is in Dhaka for us this morning. Cordelia, maybe that's a good place to start. I mean, what exactly has been the court process? Clearly, she at least didn't go there to defend herself.
Yeah, and look, she certainly isn't alone in her concerns about due process and how this court conducted itself. Only last week, we heard from a team of senior British lawyers that was led by a number of those who said that ultimately she wasn't able to get legal representation and should have done. There has also been a lot of concern about no formal evidence being presented, and this is a trial which she hasn't attended. There's also been conflict about whether she should have been tried in the first place. Her lawyers actually refute that she is a Bangladeshi citizen and say for that reason she shouldn't be tried. Now, the Bangladeshi authorities say that they have evidence in her citizenship cards, her passport, that in fact she is a citizen and she should be tried. Now, this is a very contentious case. She's been given 2 years and also asked to pay £620 to the court. If she doesn't, she'll get a further 6 months sentence. But you can hear in the tone of that statement, she is defiant. She has always denied these allegations, but she faces more outstanding charges. So this, not the end of the road for her.
Cordelia, thank you very much indeed. Now, deadly floods and landslides have torn through Indonesia, Sri Lanka and also Thailand over the last week. They've killed at least 469 people in Indonesia, 334 in Sri Lanka and 162 in Thailand. So these numbers are huge.
The flooding has left entire communities buried under mud and debris. Rescue teams and government agencies are mounting large-scale recovery operations, searching for the missing, delivering emergency aid and beginning the long process of rebuilding homes and infrastructure across the 3 countries.
And we can talk now to our correspondent, Neville Lazarus, who joins us now from Delhi. I mean, we're looking at the scenes on our screens and the devastation is clear to see. It is pretty clear, of course, as well, that the rescue operation is going to be very, very difficult in those conditions. What's the picture?
Well, it has been very difficult out here. This rare phenomena which meteorologists are calling has been a combination of 3 cyclones, 2 very rare tropical cyclones and the monsoon season, and a combination of both of these has resulted in death and destruction. The cyclone Ditwa, which tore through Sri Lanka, causing massive amounts of death and destruction across the central part of Sri Lanka mainly. But it is still not over for the country. The country is still reeling from floods. Some of the rivers are on the critical sort of conditions of breaching their sides. People have been asked to move away to higher ground or government shelters. Almost 1.3 million people have been affected in the country, which has been reeling under severe economic problems over the last few years. The country has called it an emergency and asked for international aid. The same 2 tropical cyclones have ripped through Indonesia, Thailand and Malaysia, and another cyclone Koto, going through Philippines, causing a lot of destruction and death across the Southeast East Asia region. So the woes of the people of these countries are not yet over, because now there is a lot of reconstruction and relief has still to be done in these parts of the world.
Neville, thanks so much for joining us. Neville Lazarus there in New Delhi. Now, we're talking about the Afghanistan inquiry this morning, because it's published 100 pages of classified documents that relate to evidence given by an anonymous whistleblower, a senior officer known only as N1466.
So this anonymous officer revealed or alleged that British special forces appeared to commit war crimes, and in their words, some members had a deliberate policy to kill fighting-age men, even when they didn't pose a threat. So the inquiry's in its 3rd year. It's examining the deployment of British special forces between 2010 and 2013. Sadia Chowdhury's been looking through those 100 pages.
Last summer, a senior officer known as N1466 gave evidence to the inquiry in closed sessions. That means it was in secret. No press, no public. Today, the inquiry chair has released over 100 pages of classified documents. We've been going through them over the weekend. They point to a serious and deadly trend. N1466 told the inquiry about members of a particular special forces unit referred to at the inquiry as UK SF1. He said there was a deliberate policy to kill fighting-aged males regardless of whether they posed a threat. He said women and children were summarily executed, including 2 toddlers shot in their bed next to their parents. I will be clear, he told the inquiry, we're talking about war crimes. This is from an interview he gave to the Royal Military Police all the way back in 2018. UKSF 1 had gone to clear a compound, and in a room there were people hiding under a mosquito net. They did not reveal themselves, so the UKSF 1 shot at the net until there was no movement. When the net was uncovered, it was women and children. The incident, he says, was covered up, and the individual who did the shooting was allegedly given some form of award to make it look legitimate. N1466 says the Special Forces Director, or DSF, had a desire to keep it low profile, and that he'd made a conscious decision to cover up war crimes. N1466 described an attempt to investigate what happened a charade. Afghan families have accused UKSF of conducting a campaign of murder against civilians. They say senior officers and personnel at the Ministry of Defence sought to prevent adequate investigation. The MOD said it is fully committed to supporting the inquiry and added it is appropriate that we await the outcome of the inquiry's work before commenting further. N1466 says the alleged war crimes didn't help conventional forces, saying it was a stain against their sacrifice and service. This is from his transcript at the inquiry. The alleged murders are not special, not elite. It's not what we stand for. We didn't join UKSF for this sort of behaviour. Toddlers to get shot in their beds. The inquiry continues, and the chair says he'll decide on a case-by-case basis what material is to remain secret and what can be made public.
Sadia Chowdhury there for us. Now, he's an author and survivor of multiple assassination attempts. Sir Salman Rushdie sat down with me to discuss his new book, 11th Hour, the attack on his life back in 2022 and the restrictions around free speech in the US and here. Among what we discussed, the murder of right-wing activist Charlie Kirk, Salman Rushdie described as a characteristic of America's terrifying gun culture. Here is our conversation. Well, delighted to welcome Salman Rushdie to Mornings. It's a real treat to have you with us. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you. Very nice to be with you.
And obviously you've got your new book, The 11th Hour, out. Your prior book, Knife, was a very different book that came out in 2024. It was about the attack you faced in 2022 that we might come to. But this new book, The 11th Hour, is very much a return to fiction.
Yes.
Quite light-hearted fiction.
I was really happy to be doing it, you know, because I got worried after the attack that fiction seemed to disappear for a while from my head. And once I'd written the memoir, it began to come back. You know, and I was very relieved to find the stories showing up again. So the book, I think, has a feeling of joyfulness about it, which was how I was feeling, to have stories to tell again.
In terms of the kind of aim or the hope behind the book, is it as simple as some upbeat, positive fiction, or is there a message behind it?
No, I mean, it's a kind of examination of the later stages of human life, you know, about how we face those, you know, and what do we feel about it, you know. When you're in the fifth act of the play, you know, how does that work itself out? And it also contains my first ever ghost story, I have to say, which I'm rather proud of.
Well, it sounds fantastic. And what I love about you talking in this way about it is the need for emotion, for humour, for creativity. Is all of that something that you think AI will never be able to capture?
Yes, I do think that. I mean, the couple of little experiments that I've carried out with AI suggest to me that at least this far, it doesn't have a sense of humour. And it's not original. You know, what it can do is to duplicate things that have been fed into it. But you know, good art is original, and I don't think that AI has an original bone in its body.
I wanted to rewind the clock, if I could, to 1989, when the Ayatollah issued a fatwa calling for your death, and obviously your book, The Satanic Verses, had come out the year before. As I was prepping for this, I just thought what an extraordinary moment that must have been. And, I mean, Where were you? How did it reach you, the information? What was your reaction?
I was at home, and somebody from the BBC called me and said, how did I feel about this news? And I didn't know the news until they told me. I mean, I was very alarmed. I thought probably I didn't have that long to live, I thought, you know. And then, well, you know what happened. There was a long period of police protection and so on, and fortunately I did survive it.
And you've obviously spoken about how the security services may have held off a number of potential attacks over the decades and been very open about that. Clearly, in August 2022, you faced an attempt on your life that came much closer to being successful. Why do you think that threat suddenly materialised again? Or had it always been there, but the security services had held it away?
No, I don't think it had been there. I think it was just bad luck to come across one crazy kid who had been somehow influenced to do this, because he, by his own admission, he had not read anything I'd written. You know, so, I mean, he hadn't read, he said, more than a couple of pages of something I wrote. So the impetus to carry out so serious a crime as murder must have come from outside him, you know, but I don't know who influenced him in that way. But it is very strange to me, because this wasn't somebody who had a criminal record. You know, he had no previous criminal record. And to go from zero to murder is a very big jump. And to be willing to do that to kill a total stranger, essentially.
You've spoken before about how close you were to losing your life, something that I think as time passed, you realised even more how close you were and your heart stopped beating. In light of all that, I wondered if I could ask what your reaction was, your sentiment was when you saw the news of Charlie Kirk's assassination.
You know, I mean, I'm not in favour of people being murdered. You know, so, I mean, I thought what everybody thought, you know, which is that it was an appalling act of violence. But it seems to me to be a characteristic or a consequence, let's say, of America's terrifying gun culture. You know, when you have a situation where there are more guns in private ownership than there are people in the country, you know, when guns are everywhere, where children are brought up being taught by their parents how to use guns, and guns are being left in the home in unlocked cabinets. You know, it's a country in which violent gun-related crime happens almost every day. And this is one of the most brutal examples of it. Similarly,
when you saw the news of President Trump's unsuccessful assassination attempt, did you have sympathy for him? What was your sentiment there?
I guess I'm happy. I'm happy that it failed. Beyond that, I don't have a lot to say about it.
Do you think that when you look at some of the responses to those examples that we saw, I mean, President Trump, for example, said openly that he felt God saved him. Do you think? How do you react to that? How religion is used in that way, or do you believe that to be true?
President Trump, I don't think has ever had a very close relationship with God, so I take that with a pinch of salt. But it hasn't affected my lack of religion. I mean, I did get to have quite a good look at the end of the story, and there was no miraculous element. You know, there was no tunnel of light, no pearly gates, no choirs of angels, no bubbling vats of hell. None of that. Just lying on the floor bleeding.
Your heart stopped?
Very briefly it did, yes.
And your memory of that is nothing, I guess.
I didn't know that, but fortunately there were doctors in the audience who jumped up on stage to help, and they had people hold my legs up in the air so that the blood would flow backwards to the heart, and so then it started beating again. But that's how close it was.
Sticking on the US, if I may, there's lots of sort of political and freedom of speech aspects. The thing I wanted to ask most of all is just the extent we now see a sort of kissing of the ring going on, whether it's with business leaders, politicians, even members of the press. Does it scare you?
You know, I'm beginning to think that we might just be beginning to see the end of that. That a kind of revulsion for that is beginning to spread, and the opposition is beginning to develop some spine. You know, so there's just some first signs that the authoritarian aspects of this administration might be turning people off.
And some members of the MAGA movement, some in elected office, some not, but equally high profile, use the free speech argument often, both for their own lives and for their lives in America, as well as criticising the UK and their observation for the extent of free speech that we have here. What's your take on those two sides?
Well, their use of the free speech flag is entirely hypocritical, because what they're doing, meanwhile, is trying very hard to restrict speech that they happen to disagree with, whether that speech is being made by journalists, you know, the fake New York Times, whether it's being made by late-night comedians, whether it's happening in schools, you know, where the attack on what books children may read and may not read has been very powerful.
And what about the view here? Well, I guess in light of criticism from some high-profile US members of the Trump administration, or just in its own right, an interesting week as well to be asking that question. We've just had, you know, a budget. It was contentious, but the discourse, from my perspective at least, has been very healthy. Do you celebrate the situation here, or do you worry?
I mean, I'm not worried about the UK in the way that I'm worried about America, you know. But I do think that the aftermath of Brexit has left this country, I mean, a little bit adrift, and the country hasn't really found its equilibrium, you know, since then, and I hope it does.
It's really been a privilege to catch up with you, Salman. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Salman Rushdie, they're talking to Wilf about religion, about gun culture, and I thought those comments as well, just right at the end there, about Brexit leaving the UK slightly adrift, and absolutely fascinating. You can watch the whole thing, I should say, on YouTube as well.
Still to come, Keir Starmer giving a speech at 10:30 to defend his Chancellor and their budget. We'll talk more about that coming up next.
What might happen if Russia attacked the UK?
This is clearly an enormous show of force.
It is definitely out of the ordinary.
We ran a war game with former ministers back in the hot seat.
Ben Wallace.
Amber Rudd.
Jack Straw.
It's the kind of war game that's genuinely tested inside government.
The Russians are signalling that there may be an attack.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? I'm Deborah Haynes. From Sky News and Tortoise, this is The War Game. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club.
4 more years!
Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Welcome back to Mornings with Ridge and Frost. So Keir Starmer will use a speech later this morning to defend the budget and back his Chancellor. She's continuing to battle accusations that she deliberately misled the public by painting an overly gloomy picture of the economy so that she could raise taxes.
The Labour MP Chilip Sadiq's been sentenced to 2 years in prison in Bangladesh. It's after corruption charges. The former minister here in the UK resigned earlier this year because of these accusations about illegally receiving a plot of land from her aunt, who was ousted as the country's Prime Minister last year.
A whistleblower claims UK Special Forces committed war crimes while stationed in Afghanistan. The soldier, who gave evidence to an inquiry anonymously, also said senior members of the armed forces knew what was happening but failed to act. Well, now in our top story, and the Prime Minister will defend his Chancellor in a speech later today. He'll be trying to reclaim the budget narrative and shore up Rachel Reeves after claims she misled people over the state of the economy to justify tax rises. I'm joined now by the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, Nadhim Zahawi. A very good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Morning.
What's your take 4 or 5 days on from the budget? I mean, ultimately, markets are calm. Labour MPs seem to be calm too. In the short term, at least, is it job done by the government?
Well, I think in terms of the impact on the markets, and many economists have commented on this, it's really about, can she really deliver those sort of series of tax rises? Much harder to do in terms of delivery. So that's a wait and see. I think the real problem for the Chancellor is one of political credibility. I don't think she does politics very well. You know, I watched her interviews over the weekend. She looked uncomfortable. At times, she looks just spooked and slightly haunted about, the way she has handled the sort of, November month in total. And I think both the regulator and, of course, Laurie Magnus, the person in charge of the conduct of ministers, are now looking at whether she misled the markets. That's a bad place to be for a Chancellor. One of the first lessons you learn when you walk into the Treasury, and to my colleague Kwasi Kwarteng's great pain, is every utterances that the Chancellor utters can move markets. And you have to be so responsible and careful about what you say, not to mislead markets. And that, I think, is going to be her problem this week and ongoing. Is the moment people look into what happened at her speech early in November, and then, of course, later on in the middle of November, the Treasury briefings about the 20 billion black hole that didn't exist. She was told about this in October, not even in November. So I think her bigger problem is credibility, which will then, of course, manifest itself on the PM, because he's going to try and go out and say, we are serious about cutting or at least reducing the speed of the rise of welfare budgets today. Do people believe him when he couldn't get his welfare cuts in place, about 5 billion they had to U-turn on? It's all about political credibility now for both the Chancellor and the Prime Minister.
I had a question, Nadhim, for you about how politically tied a Chancellor is to the Prime Minister. Either way, we expect the Prime Minister to sort of double down on his backing for Rachel Reeves today. You have a particular experience of this, of course, because I guess your time in number 11 was very short, because once Boris Johnson lost Rishi Sunak as Chancellor, and there was a lot of factors going on at play there. Of course, his time was almost up. I mean, do you think if Rachel Reeves were to go for whatever reason, and it doesn't look likely in the short term, that would be curtains for the Prime Minister as well?
It would be difficult. So I was a sort of caretaker Chancellor in many ways because within about a day of taking office, the Prime Minister announced he was stepping down. But we got through a load of stuff. You know, we signed off some of the nuclear investment. We did ARIA, which was in a perilous place when I came in to the Treasury. Look, ultimately, and you saw it with Kwasi. I remember I was Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster when he was Chancellor and then was sacked. The first thing he said to me is, you know, she can sack me, but it's not going to stop there. It will end at her desk. And I think this feels, you know, different but similar in the sense that, you know, Rachel's problem is the Prime Minister's problem. It's all about, he knew about the non-existent black hole. He knew that there was a surplus of about 4 billion, yet he approved that sort of morning speech, which looked like we were going to get 2p on income tax, and the markets then reacted to that. Of course, then the U-turn came later in the month. The markets reacted again. That is very, very serious. And I think the Chancellor would be well advised to come out today, if there is an urgent question, or at some point this week, and actually be much clearer to say, look, I took some political decisions. I took them for good reason. I apologise if there was any way that I misled the markets or Parliament, and you know, just draw a line. Do you remember when they used to force Boris to come to the dispatch box to have to effectively explain what was happening during COVID? And you know, the constant sort of attack on Boris was, did you really tell the truth to Parliament? Where are we on, lockdowns, all that sort of stuff? And I think if she is serious about wanting to survive, she needs to come forward and actually just put her hands up. And rather than sort of obfuscate and say, we're asking people to pay a little bit more, they're not asking us to pay a little bit more. They're forcing us to pay a lot more. You know, we had 40 billion in the last budget, another almost 30 billion now, for political reasons. She felt that she needed to sort of satisfy the hard left of her party in Parliament, and that's why she did it. Now, she can explain it and say, this is my strategy, this is why I did it, but don't try and keep hiding and obfuscating and saying, well, I didn't really do this. Because the moment Laurie Magnus looks at this, which I think he will, the moment the regulator looks at this, they will see that the OBR had actually given her all the data that she needed. She didn't need to do this. And I think she needs to come clean about it very quickly to survive.
Nadhim Zahawi, thank you so much for joining us today. We do appreciate it. And again, continuing our build-up to the Prime Minister's speech at 10:30 this morning.
Now, we just want to return to a pretty shocking story about mental health and spirituality. So this is the story of a young man called Benjamin. He, last August, killed his mother, and he also injured his father and his sister in a knife attack as he was dealing with undiagnosed schizophrenia.
Benjamin was experiencing hallucinations and felt he was being controlled. Now, his father, Joshua, has spoken to our colleague Shingi Marariki and told him that he mistook his son's mental health symptoms for a spiritual struggle. We're going to hear about this from Shingi in just a moment. But first, let's have an extract of that interview that Shingi did with the father, a warning that it contains distressing content.
If I knew, I would have taken the initiative. I would have done something about it. Because it's not, praying for someone to get healed doesn't mean the person doesn't need medical attention. It's a regret. It's a regret. If I knew, I would have done both together. Both seek the medical attention and also keep on praying for him.
I mean, Shingi joins us now. Shingi, it's an awful case, isn't it? But you've been looking as well at the wider points that it raises about religion as well, haven't you?
Yeah, that's right. And what you heard there was Joshua Obenham talking about the fact that he regrets not understanding more about schizophrenia, and he saw it as purely spiritual. He's from a deeply Christian background, and that faith has seen him recover from his injuries in the knife attack. But it also, ironically, was maybe one of the reasons why he was quite blinkered in his understanding. And we then looked at that more broadly, speaking to a forensic psychiatrist, a psychologist, Dr. Gwenad said, who's at the Royal College of Psychiatry Spirituality Interest Group, and she spoke about how psychologists are now trying to engage with spiritual communities and understand that that's the language that some of these communities have when it comes to understanding mental health.
So they see it effectively as like a kind of religious experience sometimes, right? Rather than a medical condition.
Yeah, exactly. And in that full interview, Joshua talks about how they took the time to try and pray for Benjamin when he was having those experiences as part of his schizophrenia. He was hearing voices and thinking that he was being controlled. His dad said, that's not what that is, let's pray. But actually, a lot of those communities need to understand that prayer is one part of their understanding, but there's more to it.
Can I ask perhaps a slightly basic question, but what exactly is schizophrenia? And if it's correctly identified, what are the treatment options?
Yeah, so I've had experts explain it to me as an illness that develops a lot in people's late adolescence, early 20s, and in it people may have experiences like delusions, experiences of seeing and hearing things, and that needs to be treated very early. It needs to have early intervention as well. And if, like in Benjamin's case, that doesn't happen, then there are stark examples like this, but usually the person primarily is a harm to themselves and not others, but this is just a very tragic case.
It's such a tragic case, and the thing that really stood with me, like listening to you talking about your experience of interviewing the dad, is that he's forgiven his son, that he still loves his son.
Yeah, it was so many elements of that interview I found really powerful and poignant, but for me that was the most poignant moment, the fact that he was so adamant that he loves his son, so adamant that he should forgive himself because, in Joshua's words, we have forgiven him.
Yeah, it's really moving. It's really
Shingi,
moving.
great stuff. Thanks so much. And as we mentioned before, Shingi's full report on this tragic story and the implications of it available on the Sky News website.
Next up, we're going to be looking at what it's really like to be on the front line of journalism in some of the world's most hostile environments. We'll be talking to somebody who has certainly done that throughout her career as special correspondent, Alex Crawford, about the new series Hotspots.
I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent.
An enormous explosion has just come down. I think it was a monster's just landed in between us.
Hundreds and hundreds of people hoping to get north, ultimately to get to the United States.
It's a border where they're not welcome, yet they keep coming.
We saw snatch squads going in, grabbing people, taking them out and putting them into trucks and taking them away.
They make about 50 kilos of fentanyl a week. It's incredibly dangerous and toxic stuff.
There's been an upsurge in deaths. The fighting between the gangs is getting more and more vicious.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah.
The battlefield is outside the barricades, which is over there. This is much more like a normal town. It's really sending a clear message that Venezuela is eager for change.
We've been crushed. Free from wherever you get your news. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. This is real, hardcore emergency medicine. The information on this could bring down the entire network, not just in Iraq and Syria, but across the world. Sky News, the full story first.
Well, hundreds of thousands of people have been using the beast for years to traverse Mexico, but it is really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls. and big-picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Now, Sky News is taking you behind the scenes of some of the world's most hostile environments with the return of our show Hotspots.
So from dodging gunfire in Syria to navigating gang-controlled streets in Haiti, the series aims to shine a light on how our correspondents, including Stuart Ramsey and Alex Crawford, carry out some of the most hard-hitting journalism we do.
Let's go. Watch, wait, right. We're going to get in. Right. Get in.
We just want to ask you a few questions about your involvement with ISIS. Next step for them quite often is getting on a boat and sailing illegally over into Europe.
Es un solo procesamiento, una sola sacada.
Oh my goodness. Whoa, oh my goodness. If you weren't affected, you'd be a bit of a strange person.
Turn off the camera, turn around and go away.
Well, we're delighted to say that Special Correspondent Alex Crawford is with us now to tell us a bit more about this. And Alex, whenever you and Stuart have done a new report, we always look forward to it because I think it is utterly groundbreaking always in the world of journalism globally. But what this, I think, goes beyond with that is we always talk about the need for authenticity, I think, in journalism today and engagement. And this is literally the raw footage of what's unfolding as you're trying to capture these moments to bring the full story first to our viewers.
Yeah, I think we're all facing, journalism and journalists as a whole around the world are facing a sort of barrage of being told that we're not real, that what we're producing, our reports, are fake. And that's been perpetuated by presidents and prime ministers and leaders around the world. And we're all trying to show that that's not the case, because there's a lot of very honest journalists, you know, a lot of them at Sky News and many other organisations, who are all trying to do the responsible, real journalism. This is an unvarnished look at with raw footage, unedited footage, showing you what we're discovering as we're going along, to try to regain the narrative and show that journalists, many journalists, are genuine and real, and it's up to the viewer to make their mind up. And in this, we're also introducing you to the people who are behind the scenes as well, generally, you know, the cameraman, the producer, you know, the fixers on the ground, whose, you know, our lives depend on their help and their experience. And there's a very touching scene in when we were in Sweden with our fixer, Mahmoud Musa, who I've worked with for more than 10 years, who is putting his life in our hands to go into an area where they believe they're killing Arabs and people like him. And it's just very... I hope people see what goes into making the news. And it's not just myself and Stuart's teams, it's a lot of teams at Sky News and around the world, let's face it.
Yeah, this is it. I mean, like, we're just sort of sitting in the studio here. We're going to have the easy bit, if you like, but I think it's really important.
Well, you are
like
holding politicians to account a lot.
But it feels really important, doesn't it, to recognise that the contribution of people and the perspective of people who risk their lives to bring the truth to account. I wonder as well, Alex, just hearing you talk about, you know, having to challenge the narrative about fake news. You've obviously been doing this for a long time. You've been
maybe too long.
No, never. And you know, you've got this understanding about the kind of how awful the world can be, I guess, at points, but also the kind of bravery and heroism of it as well. Do you think it's got harder because of the? I
think undoubtedly it's got really much harder because, you know, as we've seen, I'm sorry I keep bringing back Gaza, but it's a very prime example of how journalism is being smashed to bits by leaders around the world. And you see the US president sort of attacking female journalists, telling them that they're horrible people for asking questions, stopping foreign journalists from getting inside a war zone for over 2 years is unprecedented. And so, we've got to try and regain the narrative as journalists and prove by our actions and our solid reporting and our honest reporting what's real and what's fake.
And just wrap it up for us, Alistair, this is Hotspot's dedicated YouTube channel now, which people should look up and find. And the first episode is out and it runs, it's going to run permanently, but the initial run is up till the end of January,
there's many more
15,
weeks.
20 minutes.
We're rolling it out relatively slowly. I think it's on a weekly basis, and that will take us up to next year. And all the time we're producing. I mean, Stuart Ramsey and his team are out on location now. We don't want to say where they are because for their safety at the moment. And my team's going to be going on the road again in the next couple of days. So it's a constant thing. And of course, we're just 2 people, but a lot of our colleagues are doing the same thing all the time as well.
Well, stay safe. Wishing you the best of that. We look forward to the reporting from you and Stuart and the teams. And check out Hotspots, the new series, a new dedicated YouTube channel. Make sure to give it a go from Alex, Stuart and the team.
We're talking sport now. Jackie's here to talk us through it all. There was quite I'll be honest, normally with F1, it feels like, and look, I'm not as an expert as you guys, but it feels like sometimes it can be a bit of a foregone conclusion about who's going to win. And,
it totally can be.
And something happened over the weekend that's kind of blown all that up.
Well, that is one race, Qatar, where you kind of know if you get pole position, you're going to win because it's really hard to overtake on that track and there's very few chances. First corner, perhaps, but that's it. So it should have been Oscar Piastri's race to win. He was fastest, he won the sprint, he was on pole position, and it all went wrong because of a strategy that McLaren got just disastrously wrong. I mean, they should have pitted after the crash that happened on lap 7. Everybody else pitted at that point. And the thing about this track is you're only allowed to race for 25 laps on one set of tyres, and then you have to change them because of the wear and tear on the tyres. So everybody knows that you've got to have 2 pit stops. And then this seemed the perfect time to pit stop. Everybody else came in and went, safety car's out, let's get the new tyres on. We've got saved loads of time there. And now we can race for 25 laps.
So it's like free time for a pit stop, basically.
Kind of thing, yes. So the McLarens didn't. They were the 2 cars out in front at 1 and 2 on the grid. And of course, it was a disaster. It was absolutely the wrong call, and it's cost Piastri that race victory.
And it's created amazing jeopardy ahead of the final race.
And it's created great jeopardy. For the first time since 2010, you've got 3 drivers in with a shout of winning the World Championship. And Max Verstappen, who looked down and out, a few months ago, is right back in it and finds himself in second in the standings after this weekend. So you've got Lando Norris, who finished off the podium this weekend because of that disastrous strategy, off the podium, but still 12 points clear. So his lead was 24, now it's only 12. It leaves the situation whereby Norris, if he finishes 3rd or better, he is world champion, which is, very doable. But, as we can see here, anything can absolutely happen. Verstappen's now in 2nd on 396 points, and Piastri, who was 2nd, is in 3rd on 392. But it's quite exciting. I mean, Verstappen said earlier in the week, as a sort of part of the mind games, if I had their car, I'd have won this ages ago.
I love that.
He is the best driver.
He is the best, but he also had quite a few years of the best car. And they've improved his car in the after. I just,
but he is a very good
God,
driver.
It is tedious in this sport how they always bring it back to the car. Just own it, when you're doing badly, and then when you do well.
But it's because of the car, though, isn't it?
Well, the car makes a big difference.
Formula 1, isn't it?
Well, I think if you have a really good driver and a really good car, you're really going to win. But, it's just put a lot of pressure onto Lando Norris and onto those 2 drivers. It really, really has, going into the final weekend.
Before we go, we were chatting Sunderland in the last hour because of their amazing comeback victory, 3-2. They ended up winning over the weekend. And we got an email through. This is Andrew Farley, who has emailed in, mainly because of his wife, who's a big Sunderland fan. We love that. It's Amanda's birthday. So Andrew emailed in to say, we're huge fans of the show, which we always like to hear. It's my wife's birthday today. Amanda Farley, she's a big Sunderland fan. So we wanted to give Amanda a little shout out because she's
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Amanda. Hope you're having a great day.
Sunderland's,
great
you know,
comeback.
Hope you're still celebrating.
It was a great comeback. But Granit Xhaka, I just want Granit Xhaka. There's two reasons why they are doing so well, and Stadium of Light, obviously, and the fact that they just pretty unbeatable there.
Yeah, it's looking good, isn't it? And then, of course, got the Arsenal were held to a draw, right?
We talk about that next hour because there was a lot to unpack in that match.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Arsenal walking away very disappointed. Do you want to know a fun fact about Alex Crawford?
Oh, yeah.
Our children met at university completely randomly, got talking and went, do you think our mums know each other? Did a little picture and sent it. Yeah.
No way.
Yeah. Became friends. Random.
Love that. Love to hear that.
they do.
Jackie,
They do
great
know
stuff.
each
We'll
other.
talk more about the football specifically next hour. But just to wrap up this hour, we've been asking you to get in touch with your Christmas decoration pictures, given that, of course, it is now December. Mornings at sky.uk is how you can send those in. We've got a taste of a couple of them for you here. This one's from Dave Whitmore in Stoke-on-Trent. Very nice Christmas tree there. We've got another one.
This is from Ant Watts. Our viewer sent this one in as well. This is Ant Watts too. And here's Gary and Tina from Fleet in Hampshire, who also sent us a picture of their Christmas tree as well. Looks like got a few presents wrapped as well, getting ahead of the game. And Tom in Preston doesn't just have his Christmas tree sorted, he's got his stocking up and ready as well. Absolutely love it.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
Good morning, it's 9 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
Sophie and Wilf, good morning from me as well. Let's get to it.
The Prime Minister sets out to defend his Chancellor after claims she misled people over the state of the economy so she could justify her tax-raising budget.
The Labour MP, Chilip Sadiq, is sentenced to 2 years for corruption charges in a Bangladeshi court.
UK Special Forces are accused of committing war crimes in Afghanistan with allegations some soldiers had a deliberate policy to kill fighting-age men even when they didn't pose a threat.
Also today, with prices rising, how do you still get your money's worth on TV subscriptions?
And new research suggests that more than 60% of us are currently subscription cycling each month. To watch our favourite shows or get the best deal, we'll chat to a consumer rights expert.
Hello, good morning. Well, we're all gearing up to a big speech from Keir Starmer today. It's at 10:30. He's going to be trying to reclaim the budget narrative. Sorry, there you are.
We both got that wrong.
Camera.
We both got that wrong.
I'm going to... after claims she misled people over the state of the economy to justify tax rises, the Prime Minister will say he's setting the course, the right economic course for Britain.
I hope he's got very clear teleprompters.
Yeah.
No, that was not a swipe. I was looking at completely the wrong place as well.
Yeah.
We both made that error. Now, tax rises aren't generally popular, and this budget raised taxes by £26 billion. Most of that was through freezing income tax thresholds, so more people end up being higher taxpayers.
The Chancellor's measures will also mean the overall level of taxation will hit an all-time high of 38% of national income by 2031. This was the Prime Minister and the Chancellor last week after delivering the budget.
Those are Labour choices, promised and delivered by this budget, promised and delivered by this Labour government. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, I commend this statement to the House.
Well, from that positive celebratory tone to this on Trevor Phillips's programme yesterday.
I'm quoting here. For months, Reeves has lied to the public to justify record tax hikes to pay for more welfare. Did you lie?
Look, I'm a Labour Chancellor. I want to reduce child poverty. I make no apologies for that. This will be the biggest ever reduction in child poverty in a parliament ever. And I'm proud to be the Chancellor that lifts 500,000 kids out of poverty. That means kids not going to bed hungry. It means kids not waking up in cold and damp homes. And I am proud, and I'm very happy to defend the choices I've made.
I just asked you, did you lie? And I have to say, the answer I was looking for was no. And
well,
I didn't hear the word no.
But you also asked about welfare in that question.
No, I just asked you, did you lie?
Of course I didn't.
Well, a little earlier, we got the take of the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, Nadhim Zahawi.
I think the real problem for the Chancellor is one of political credibility. I don't think she does politics very well. You know, I watched her interviews over the weekend. She looked uncomfortable. At times, she looks just spooked and slightly haunted about, you know, the way she has handled the sort of, you know, November month in total.
All right, let's chat to Mari, shall we? I think it's fair to say that they're trying to reset the narrative on the budget a bit, right? So we've got this speech from Keir Starmer today.
Yeah, absolutely. To an extent, it's the kind of fight back. It's defending the budget. It's justifying the budget. It's trying to counteract some of the narrative, rhetoric and media coverage that we've seen in the past few days since the budget, and partly about what's in the budget and partly about the way the budget was handled in the kind of run-up to it. And so we're expecting the PM to talk about 3 things that he thinks the budget is there for and there to achieve. So first, reducing the cost of living. Second, ensuring economic stability. Third, protecting investment and public services, specifically to drive growth. And so he's also then going to actually go further and talk about welfare. Now, we know how much Labour love to talk about welfare, and it's always a kind of sore spot for that party. He wants to talk about the justification for reducing the welfare bill, for cutting the welfare bill.
After just putting it up in the budget.
Right, so he put it up by several billion. He also failed to cut it last time around because of a backbench rebellion, remember that, which was actually quite humiliating and indicative, really, of a weakness in his leadership. But also, he's got all these quotes that they've trailed overnight. So, for instance, he says we have to confront the reality that our welfare state is trapping people not just in poverty but out of work. He's going to talk specifically about the young and young people and how we know that the level of young people on long-term out-of-work benefits has increased ever since COVID and is, to an extent, unsustainable but also unaffordable. And so he's going to try and make that argument today. The difficulty is, the Tories are saying that that idea is laughable because what they're arguing is he's already been defeated once and they're arguing that last week's budget was a benefit street budget. Obviously, some people would take issue with that rhetoric, but nonetheless, that's the argument that the Tories are going on. And what they're trying to say is actually Rachel Reeves should resign because, first of all, she's broken a manifesto pledge on tax through the back door, and also they're arguing that she's been misleading in some of the briefings ahead of the budget.
It's going to be really interesting to hear how he frames this sort of requirement to cut welfare spending if it's that explicit, because it could otherwise come across as a sort of acknowledgement that, at least in our 18 months in power so far, and up until the moment that we might get some new legislation over the line, we are admitting that we're overspending by billions of pounds. And when you put people's taxes up, that doesn't go down that well. It's quite a hard sort of argument to deliver in light, as Sophie pointed out, of putting up welfare spending just last week.
It's difficult. Tax rises are never going to be popular. The problem is you already had a historic level of tax in this country under the Conservatives. You've now increased it even further at a time when people don't feel that they are getting value for money in their public services. They also put up taxes to essentially pay for lifting the two-child benefit cap when we know that policy is not popular with the public. It's not popular with Labour Party voters. It's only popular with members. And so the difficulty is that the rhetoric has been Labour has put up your taxes to pay for other people's benefits, and they are having to try and reject that narrative and make the argument for why they think this will make the UK a better place to live.
Thanks very much, Mari. Always good to get your analysis on the programme. Now, the Labour MP Tulip Siddiq has been sentenced to 2 years in prison in Bangladesh, in absentia, I should say. It's following corruption charges.
The former City Minister resigned earlier this year after accusations of illegally receiving a plot of land from her aunt, Sheikh Hasina, who was ousted as the country's Prime Minister last year.
So we have had a statement through from Tulip Siddiq. She said the whole process has been flawed and farcical from the beginning to the end. The outcome of this kangaroo court is as predictable as it's unjustified. I hope this so-called verdict will be treated with the contempt it deserves.
My focus has always been on my constituents in Hampstead and Highgate, and I refuse to be distracted by the dirty politics of Bangladesh.
Oh, well, here's our Asia correspondent Cordelia Lynn. She's been following events from Dhaka.
A court here in Dhaka in Bangladesh has just found Labour MP Tulip Siddiq guilty of trying to influence her aunt, former leader of Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina, to try and secure a plot of land in a suburb of the city for her mother. Now, she's been sentenced to 2 years in jail and ordered to pay 1 lakh. That's around £620. And the judge said that if she doesn't make that payment, she will have a further 6 months added to her sentence. Now, this has been a very high-profile corruption case and a very contentious one too. Tulip Siddiq has always denied the charges against her, saying that this is a political witch hunt, a foregone conclusion that she would be found guilty. And today, she has indeed been found guilty. Now, it carried a possible life sentence, and that is not what's occurred. But nevertheless, this court has said that she made phone calls to her aunt and that she sought to try and influence her illegally to try and get this significant plot of land. Now, allies to her said this morning that this was a farcical case that the odds were always stacked against her from the beginning, and indeed lawyers in the UK have also raised concern about due process. Tulip Siddiq said that she never received any formal communications from the court, that she wasn't able to get a lawyer, but she's been treated as a fugitive here, and it's the court's contention that she has no right to a lawyer as a result of that. But here you can see big crowds, the courtroom was packed, and Tulip Siddiq, the former anti-corruption minister, has been sentenced to 2 years in jail in absentia.
Well, in the last few minutes, the Labour Party spokesperson has shared this statement. The Labour Party and all our elected representatives take the rule of law incredibly seriously and will always fulfil our legal responsibility. As has been reported, highly regarded senior legal professionals have highlighted that Tulip Siddiq has not had access to a fair legal process in this case and has never been informed of the details of the charges against her. This is despite repeated requests made to the Bangladeshi authorities through her legal team. Anyone facing any charge should always be afforded the right to make legal representations when allegations are made against them. Given that has not happened, in this case, we cannot recognise this judgment.
Now, the number of people killed in floods and landslides across Southeast Asia has reached more than 800. The Indonesian island of Sumatra was the worst affected, and many, many people are still missing.
The flooding has left entire communities buried under mud and debris. Rescue teams and government agencies are mounting large-scale recovery efforts, delivering emergency aid and beginning the long process of rebuilding homes and infrastructure across the three countries. Let's bring in Neville Lazarus, who joins us now from Delhi. Neville, this has affected huge swathes of Southeast Asia, but most recently Indonesia.
That's correct. I mean, the pictures that we are seeing from Indonesia, particularly north and western parts of the Sumatra island, close to Aceh province, you've seen the scale, the extensive scale of death and devastation around out there. It was caused by a rare tropical cyclone, Cyclone Senya, with a combination of the monsoon season. Now, we believe that the cyclone did not come with very heavy winds, very strong winds, but nevertheless it combined with the massive monsoon season, bringing about huge flash floods and landslides across that region, killing hundreds, and hundreds are missing, or the government says about 400 people are still missing in that place. The cyclone also brought a lot of devastation to the southern districts of Thailand. 170 people have died out there. In Malaysia, it has affected. There's also been effects by Cyclone Koto, which is also a rare cyclone in that part to have affected Philippines. Cyclone Ditwa, which made landfall in the central parts of Sri Lanka, has devastated huge tracts of land. I mean, we've seen pictures where there is just towns and cities are inundated with water. Landslides have killed a number of people, over 342 people, according to the Disaster Management Office. Also, over 370 are missing, affecting 1.3 million people. This country, which is already reeling from economic problems, this is surely going to have a massive effect on the country's economy, society in general. But the phenomena of these cyclones combined with the monsoon season has brought about death and devastation in the region.
Neville, thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Now we're talking about the Afghanistan inquiry next, because it's published 100 pages of classified documents, and it all relates to this evidence that was given by an anonymous whistleblower. It's a senior officer known only as NI466.
The officer revealed that British Special Forces appeared to commit war crimes and that some members had a deliberate policy to kill fighting-age men, even when they didn't pose a threat. Well, the inquiry, now into its third year, is examining the deployment of British Special Forces between 2010 and 2013. As Sadia Chowdhury now explains.
Last summer, a senior officer known as N1466 gave evidence to the inquiry in closed sessions. That means it was in secret. No press, no public. Today, the inquiry chair has released over 100 pages of classified documents. We've been going through them over the weekend. They point to a serious and deadly trend. N1466 told the inquiry about members of a particular Special Forces unit referred to at the inquiry as UK SF1. He said there was a deliberate policy to kill fighting-aged males regardless of whether they posed a threat. He said women and children were summarily executed, including 2 toddlers shot in their bed next to their parents. I will be clear, he told the inquiry, we're talking about war crimes. This is from an interview he gave to the Royal Military Police all the way back in 2018. UKSF-1 had gone to clear a compound, and in a room there were people hiding under a mosquito net. They did not reveal themselves, so the UKSF-1 shot at the net until there was no movement. When the net was uncovered, it was women and children. The incident, he says, was covered up, and the individual who did the shooting was allegedly given some form of award to make it look legitimate. N1466 says the Special Forces Director, or DSF, had a desire to keep it low profile and that he'd made a conscious decision to cover up war crimes. N1466 described an attempt to investigate what happened a charade. Afghan families have accused UKSF of conducting a campaign of murder against civilians. They say senior officers and personnel at the Ministry of Defence sought to prevent adequate investigation. The MOD said it is fully committed to supporting the inquiry and added it is appropriate that we await the outcome of the inquiry's work before commenting further. N1466 says the alleged war crimes didn't help conventional forces, saying it was a stain against their sacrifice and service. This is from his transcript at the inquiry. The alleged murders are not special, not elite. It's not what we stand for. We didn't join UKSF for this sort of behaviour. Toddlers to get shot in their beds. The inquiry continues, and the chair says he'll decide on a case-by-case basis what material is to remain secret and what can be made public.
We'll have more, of course, on that Afghan inquiry throughout the day on Sky News. Now, with the pressure on Rachel Reeves after last week's budget, we're going to be speaking to the Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, that is Alex Burghart. The Conservatives now effectively saying Rachel Reeves has got to go.
What might happen if Russia attacked the UK?
This is clearly an enormous show of force.
It is definitely out of the ordinary.
We ran a war game with former ministers back in the hot seat.
Ben Wallace.
Amber Rudd.
Jack Straw.
It's the kind of war game that's genuinely tested inside government.
The Russians are signalling that there may be an attack.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? I'm Deborah Haynes. From Sky News and Tortoise, this is The War Game. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Welcome back. Well, we've been talking an awful lot about the budget fallout, of course, from last week. Keir Starmer's doing a speech on welfare and growth late today. Let's get the view of the opposition now. Joining us is the Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, that is Alex Burghart. Good to see you.
Morning.
So, what are you expecting then from Keir Starmer's speech?
I think this is a panic. I think this is a classic attempt to try and regain his footing after a disastrous budget last week that has fallen apart over the weekend with accusations that his Chancellor lied to the country, lied to the markets during the run-up to it. And what he's now trying to do is say, oh, we've got a plan for welfare, when we know that they don't. You know, that they increased welfare spending by £16 billion in the budget, and they managed to find that money by increasing taxes on working people. So for him to now say, oh, you know, we're going to perform budget reform is just a nonsense.
So do you think, just to be clear on what your position is, do you think Rachel Reeves needs to go?
Yes, I do. I do. And I think that what we saw is actually quite serious, very serious, that in the run-up to the budget, she claimed that there was a hole in the public finances, which it now transpires didn't exist, and that the Independent Office for Budget Responsibility says it didn't exist. So
Keir Starmer knew about it too?
Yes, of course.
Does he need to go as well then?
Well, I mean, that's a very good question, and I think the reason why the Prime Minister hasn't sacked his Chancellor is because he knows he would be next.
Do you think he needs to go?
I think if it's shown that Rachel Reeves has, if the FCA, we've asked the FCA to investigate, if the FCA finds out that that this was really untoward, it will go right to the top.
And what does that mean?
Well, it means that they will need to take responsibility for their actions.
And what does that mean?
I think you know what that means.
No, tell me, what does it mean?
The Chancellor will certainly have to go, and it will depend on what the Prime Minister knew at what time.
OK. I just want to zoom out for a minute, because at the heart of this is the claim that the black hole was not as bad as the government led us to believe. So that basically means that they have done better economically than you were perhaps saying?
It was better than they were saying. And
well, and you as well. I mean, all of us, right?
Look, we don't see the figures.
No, but the heart of this is that the economy is in a stronger position than we all thought.
It's not quite that straightforward. What happened was that inflation had driven up revenue.
So the economy was in a better position than we thought.
It meant that she didn't have a £20 billion black hole.
So the economy was in a better position than we thought it was,
No,
right?
it was in a better position than it could have been. This is based on her projections, you remember.
But
she was saying...
Sorry,
if you rewind, right, you remember after the budget in 2024, she said, this is a one-off. I don't need to come back.
Sorry, with respect, we're getting to a completely different argument here, because you're talking about accountability, you're talking about truth, right? Which is, I'm not saying these are not unimportant things, they are, but we spent the first half of the interview talking about them. What we are looking at now is an economic picture that is better than expected. Should we not be happy about that?
No, so again, that's not quite right, because as you'll have seen,
we have... black hole is not where it was, right?
If I say to you, I've run up £10,000 on my credit card, and then I say, actually, I only ran up £2,000 on my credit card.
Yeah, I'll be like,
does that mean I've managed my finances well?
I'm not saying that. But what I would say is, if we all thought we were dealing with a credit card debt of 10 grand and then it's 2,000 grand, most of us are very, very happy about that and think, actually, maybe somebody has done a good job in paying down 7.5 grand of debt.
So we didn't think that until the Chancellor told us, right? So the Chancellor stands up in the run-up to the budget and says...
I'm not talking about the comms here. I'm not talking about what you would see as a deception.
Is, could it have been worse? Yeah, it could have been worse, but it's still not good. It's still bad enough that she's had to raise taxes in order to cover additional public spending.
If we take away the whole row about comms, and I accept the comms has been terrible, right? And I accept that there will be people in Number 10 and Labour MPs thinking, what have we done here? Is the overall story not good?
Yes, because growth was downgraded in every growth was after this year, growth has been downgraded in every single year of the forecast.
It has improved in the year that we actually know what happened.
In one year,
2024,
it's up. It's then down in
that's
every
those
single
years
year.
that we know
and
the
other
facts
thing
on how
that isn't
they've done.
figured
The
into
others
the
haven't
budget.
happened yet.
Well, the other thing, well, that's the thing about forecasts. They haven't happened yet. And the thing that we also know is that the budget calculations have not taken account of the employment bill, which is going through Parliament, which by some analyses is going to hit business to the tune of £5 billion.
So Rachel Rees is right then, that there's stuff they haven't taken. This is where my head is slightly exploding here, because I just can't. We're in a situation where you guys are coming in saying actually things are loads better than we thought it was going to be.
I'm definitely not saying things are loads better than we thought it would be. What I'm saying is that the Chancellor was dishonest about the information she'd been given during the budget. The consequence of that was that the markets were led to believe that things were in a particular position. They were led to believe that she was going to breach her manifesto commitments and increase income tax. And what actually happened was that she'd been given totally different information. If you look online at the moment, you look at what senior figures in the city are saying. They're saying if a private company had behaved like this, the executives would be fired and some of them might face criminal prosecution. That's how serious it is. So this is why we've called on the FCA to investigate. We've called on the Chancellor to come to the House of Commons today in order to account for what she's done, because really somebody has to take responsibility for this.
OK, thank you very much.
Thanks
It was good to have you on the programme, Alex Burghart, there speaking to us. Coming up, we are going to be talking about Australia's ban on social media for under-16s. Could the UK follow suit? We'll be talking to a tech journalist and a former employee of Instagram and Facebook about that. Hello, welcome back. Let's have a look at the news we've got this morning. Keir Starmer is going to be using a speech later to defend the budget and also back his Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, who's continuing to battle accusations she misled the public by painting an overly gloomy picture of the economy so she could raise taxes.
Labour MP Tulip Siddiq has been sentenced to 2 years in prison in Bangladesh following corruption charges. The former minister resigned earlier this year after accusations of illegally receiving a plot of land from her aunt Sheikh Hasina, who was ousted as the country's Prime Minister last year.
A whistleblower claims UK Special Forces committed war crimes while stationed in Afghanistan. The soldier, who gave evidence to an inquiry anonymously, also said senior members of the armed forces knew what was happening but didn't act.
Now, we want to return to a shocking story about mental health and spirituality. It's the story of a young man called Benjamin, who last August killed his mother and injured his father and sister in a knife attack as he was dealing with undiagnosed schizophrenia.
So Benjamin was experiencing hallucinations and he felt that he was being controlled, and his dad, Joshua, has spoken to our colleague Shingi Mariki and told him that he mistook his son's mental health symptoms for a spiritual struggle. We'll hear more about it from Shingi in a moment, but let's have a look at some of the interview first. It obviously does contain distressing content.
I give glory to God, and I appreciate the doctors. Not only the doctors, all the hospital staff. They were wonderful. Wonderful. I never wish anybody would go through that. Never ever. And in as much as I appreciate what the doctors and the hospital staff did, I give all glory to God. I do. Who am I to deserve that favour?
Shingi's with us again, and a reminder, if you scan the QR code on the screen, you can see his full report, which is well worth looking at. Shingi, we've talked about lots of different areas of this so far throughout the day. How wide a problem is schizophrenia across the UK, and what's the sort of government policy on it?
So in terms of the wider issue, we've taken the time to speak to experts who understand it, and they've said that undiagnosed schizophrenia is a deep issue, and that in terms of numbers, there isn't a real way to quantify them. But the early support, especially when it comes to cases like this, where there's a very specific cultural context, is of importance, and ensuring that certain communities get that help and support is also of importance.
And Shingi, can you talk a bit more about that cultural context that you mentioned there? What do you mean by that?
So in this case in particular, Joshua's family are deeply Christian and deeply spiritual, which I think is a distinction within that. So when Benjamin was experiencing those issues and seeing things and having that kind of altered state of reality that comes with schizophrenia, they thought that it was something that they could pray away, something that they could deal with in that shape or form. And that's something that actually, according to a bishop we spoke to, is a broader part of the canopy of Christian doctrine, to use his words.
So it's like they see it as a spiritual experience, basically, rather than like a kind of medical thing, really.
Yeah, to use Joshua's words, he thought that his son was demonized. He thought that there was some sort of demonic activity taking place, and he was very frank and open in the interview, which I'm really grateful for.
Yeah.
What has happened to his son? What stage is the process is that all at?
So Benjamin has been sentenced, which is part of why we are now telling the story, and he's at Ashworth, which is a secure unit for mental health patients, and that's an indefinite sentence. And that came off the back of a court hearing, which was really difficult to hear, because one of the people we heard from was a forensic psychiatrist who had treated Benjamin, and he spoke a bit about how one of the issues was the fact that the family didn't quite get to grips with it, and there had been no previous issues beyond that until
all of a sudden.
So they hadn't contacted anyone, there'd been no kind of medical doctors who'd given them support or advice, nothing, no drugs, that's it.
Nothing. They couldn't get out of the slightly isolated bubble they were in to get that help and advice, which is a huge part of why Joshua's speaking out.
I feel it's really kind of amazing how Joshua's spoken about it. Like, it's very brave that he's kind of acknowledged what's happened, that he's come to grips with it, and also in the depth of this absolute tragedy, that he said that he's forgiving his son as well.
Yeah, a really powerful, poignant part of the interview was him saying he has forgiven his son, but also him reflecting on what life has been like without his wife. So much of that interview is him paying tribute to her and at the same time balancing the fact he still somehow forgives and loves his son.
Shingy, great stuff. Thanks so much. A reminder, again, QR code on your screen right now to check out Shingy's full report on that extraordinary and tragic story.
Now, in just over a week's time, Australia is going to be banning social media for under 16s, and that's going to come into force. So from the 10th of December, social media companies like Meta, TikTok, YouTube, they must all ensure that children in Australia can't hold accounts on their platforms. Well, last week I spoke to the Chief Executive of Ofcom, Dame Melanie Dawes, about whether the UK could do the same. Australia, like, banning social media for under 16s. I mean, if the guys don't do what you hope that they will, do you think we should start looking at these kind of options?
Well, I think the Australian experience is going to be very interesting. On the 10th of December, they're switching off social media for under 16s, and they're calling it a delay. They're saying it's a delay, and they're investing a lot in education during those earlier years, 13, 14, 15. So actually, young people are equipped when they do go onto social media. They're going to be testing the impact on kids spending time doing sport and other activities, on mental health. I mean, I'm watching that with interest, and I think we should all be, and I think the tech industry needs to as well.
Melanie Dawes last week with us. Let's speak now to the tech journalist and former employee of Instagram, of course owned by Facebook, by Meta, Will Guyot, who joins us now. Will, firstly, I mean, is the tech community watching what happens in Australia very closely indeed? And I guess tech companies fearful that it might be followed in other countries?
I have to bring up what was said there by the previous contributor, because good luck switching this off next week, because nobody in technology or in the world of Australian politics knows how that's actually going to be possible at the moment. I know it's aspirational, but you can't simply turn this off instantly. Everybody keeps talking about age verification to stop this. We've got age estimation at best at the moment, and on a really good day, that's about 75% accurate. So you've still got a quarter of Australian under 16s potentially happily using those platforms. But everybody will be looking at this. Australia is a massive petri dish. I do quite a lot of work with Australian talkback talk stations, and Australians are clearly really interested in this. But what I find most interesting as a tech journalist and somebody that previously worked for those platforms, in Australia, there was an awful lot of our government is stepping in to help us protect young people. I've always felt quite strongly, and not because I work there, that Mark Zuckerberg doesn't deliver a phone to your home with all of these apps installed. Parents do still play an important role in what their kids do and what they view online.
I wouldn't say that any parent would abdicate responsibility here, right? You know,
I didn't say
that. I'm not saying you did. Sorry, I didn't. Well, I don't think I did say that. I'm just saying that that's not what I would say. That parents would abdicate responsibility. I don't think that parents would abdicate responsibility. But I guess the argument is that, you know, parents could do with a bit of a helping hand as well, right? And if you look at you know, some of the evidence on what it's doing to kids' reading levels, on distraction levels, if you look at a lot of what kids are saying themselves as well, it feels like there should be some kind of support to help, you know, to help kids stay off phones for longer, no?
I think there needs to be a bigger survey. A lot of what we've got at the moment are tragic cases, and there definitely are.
What kind of survey?
Cases.
What kind of survey do you want? I mean, like, there's an awful lot of evidence, I think, already, isn't there?
There's a lot of vibe at the moment, and a lot of organisations claim that they have small survey sizes of evidence. A wider understanding of the impact of what this technology does on society, not just to kids, would actually be a really sound move. And arguably, you get the social media companies to pay for that if you want them to operate in the UK or in any other country.
So you think that a survey funded by the social media companies would be the way to go to find out whether or not it's having a damaging impact?
I'm saying you could get money from them and have an entirely independent survey. That is completely possible. If you're telling the social networks their license to operate depends on keeping certain people off of the platform, why not take some of that money and some of those efforts to try and really get to grips with what the issues are? I'm not denying there are issues, but we do not fully understand the extent that the power of this technology has on society. The average smartphone is 75,000 times more powerful than took humans to the moon, and we've all got them in our pockets. We're all using them too many times every day. But we need to look at what that does to a society. And that's potentially one of the most interesting things that comes from this Australian survey. If I could be coming back to you in 5 years and saying it was the bravest and most sensiblest move that any country ever in the world has ever taken. But we're not going to know until one country has gone through this. And Australia is not ready for this for next week. VPNs will easily break the solution that they've got in place. And then it's down to the Australian government as to whether they want to fine heavily the tech companies. Let's see what happens then.
Yeah, I mean, that might well be the case, and we can all watch with interest how they adapt the policies as things go. I mean, I think we've got our own experience with implementing the Online Safety Act here. It's never going to be solved overnight. It's a complicated issue. Just stepping back from all of that, and as you said, age verification isn't perfect. It's been applied to some things in this country, like use of porn websites, and the use of those websites has collapsed. So it's clearly worked to an extent. But coming back to all of this, to what extent are Google and Apple in particular, because they house the app stores for 99% of people who use smartphones, if they wanted to put in place age verification at the point of purchase of an app, would that be something that could be enforced quite easily?
No, because the only way of age verifying with apps currently is if somebody has a credit card, and not all 16-year-olds have credit cards. And talking about the collapse of numbers as a result of the Online Safety Act, we don't have data from any of those porn companies as to how many people are actually using VPNs to circumvent that scenario at the moment. So there is definitely a drop. It may not be as big as it actually appears.
Well, you said 75%, it works in 75% of cases, age verification. So if you get 75% of kids off it, then that would be a pretty good move, don't you?
Yeah, and I think we need to have a bigger and wider conversation about how age verification is used, who should be using what platforms, what ages are acceptable, because there is peer pressure. Kids do ask their parents to get them on these platforms, but on many occasions it's the parents that are installing apps to devices, letting their children go on them. So there needs to be a wider set of conversations. When I was a kid, there used to be loads of different adverts on TV about, don't go into power substations, don't swim on a full stomach, all of those kind of public safety films. Maybe we need a campaign like that, which just talks to people about social media, what's acceptable and what's not, because nobody is teaching parents what is acceptable in these platforms and these services. We are guessing as a society. Nobody is giving us the guidance of how many hours are acceptable. Nobody is telling us.
OK, thanks very much. Indeed, always good to get perspectives like that. Thank you.
Up next, we're going to be talking about TV streaming habits with a consumer rights expert, Grace Farrell. That's next.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
Traveling is not just about the destination, it's also about how you get there. Fly Emirates, fly better. Fly Emirates, fly better. Thank you.
A very little bit of breaking news to bring you now, because two former Conservative MPs have announced today that they are defecting to Reform, leaving the Conservative Party. One is Jonathan Gullis, who is the former Conservative MP for Stoke-on-Trent North. He was also a minister, a former Minister for Schools as well. And the second one is Leon Nietzsche, who was the former Conservative for Grimsby. So interesting, we are seeing this kind of steady trickle, I think I'll describe it, of defections from the Conservatives to Reform. Neither of them sitting MPs, I should say now, both of them previous Conservative MPs announcing today that they are defecting to Reform.
Now, plenty of us have TV subscriptions that we're not using enough to get our money's worth, especially as prices for streaming services continue to go up.
Well, research from ScreenThink says there has been a bit of a shift in consumer behaviour. 63% of UK subscription users say they're currently what they describe as subscription cycling each month, or open to doing so. This is when people sign up and then cancel different services to watch specific shows or get the best deal. I'm joined now by the consumer rights expert, Grace Farrell. Grace, thanks so much for joining us. I guess the first thing to note on this sort of subscription cycling is it depends which services allow you to do that. And a lot of those new services, Netflix is hardly new anymore, but I guess we still think of it that way, have allowed that for a long time to attract people. They've now started putting prices up and people wonder whether they might not allow that sort of cycling of subscriptions before long.
Yeah, I mean, subscription cycling is actually now quite mainstream. I mean, in the past, people were a bit more loyal. You know, they would sign up to their different subscription streaming services and stick with them. But now people are just wise to it, and people are far more likely to dip in and out. And if they see a show that they really want to binge, they'll take out a sort of a 30-day trial, or they'll sign up for a month and then stop that and move on to the next one.
And so is this all about people just seeing specific shows that they've heard loads about, that's supposed to be great, everyone's chatting about, and just them wanting to watch that show? I guess it shows the pull of some of these big series.
Yeah, that's certainly one factor. I mean, if we cast our mind back, say, 10 years to the mid-2010s, when Netflix was reasonably new, it was quite novel, and the idea of being able to binge an entire show was just, it was unheard of. And so there was such a big appetite for it. And then we saw Disney Plus, Apple TV, Prime, and then the smaller services like Hayu, Paramount, Discovery Plus. There was such a big appetite for it. But I think now that the dust has settled and, you know, people are hard up, people are starting to reevaluate just how much value they're getting from their subscription services and starting to think, well, actually, I couldn't possibly watch everything on Netflix and Disney and Amazon Prime. So they're just being more selective with what they sign up for. And it's quite typical now, and it's something that I recommend as a consumer expert, to choose one kind of anchor subscription site, perhaps Netflix, Disney or Prime, which really sort of ticks a lot of boxes. And then perhaps one on the go, every other month, depending on what you want. So, if you're really into reality TV, perhaps that would be Hey You, but they all offer slightly different things.
What is the kind of overall take on price per hour of good content that's available? I mean, there was a mad rush initially because all these streaming services were launching and it was all about get as many consumers as you possibly can. So perhaps they were a bit underpriced. They've all been putting prices up over the course of the last couple of years. Are we back to kind of similarly expensive content as we were a decade ago before there was that price rush? Or is it still, if someone did have the time to watch it all, would it be quite cheap?
I mean, if someone had the time to watch everything that was offered on Netflix, for example, then I think it's certainly very good value for money. I mean, you're looking at, there are lots of different packages, but Netflix, you're looking at sort of £6 to £19 at the higher end. And when you consider how big the catalogue is, I actually think it's pretty good value for money, even though prices are increasing. But I think consumers are now used to having so many options available to them that when prices do increase, it does make them think twice. I mean, Disney, you're looking at between sort of £6 at the bottom end, so similar to Netflix, going up to about £15. So it's a bit cheaper than Netflix if you're taking out a higher package, but still really big names. I mean, Disney is the one that you want if you're into the big Disney franchises. I mean, they've got like the Taylor Swift Eras Tour docuseries coming out in December, for example. So I think, I'd say that's reasonably priced. Prime Video is an interesting one because that's about $8.99 a month on the standard rate. But you're getting the free next day delivery, Amazon Music, Amazon Photos and all of that. So I think if you're really using your subscription sites to their fullest, then I think the pricing is very fair. It's when you've got lots of different sites and you're not using them enough that it becomes an issue.
We're out of time. Thank you very much indeed for coming on the programme.
Jackie's here. Time to talk more about the sport, and we switching.
Do you want to do Battle of the Bridge or Catastrophe of Qatar?
Oh, look at this! It's like
Which one shall we go?
Sounds really exciting.
Let's start with Battle of the Bridge this hour.
All right.
Because we've been leading with the F1 so far, which was quite a sort of
it was really
heated.
Spiteful. Yeah, it was really spiteful. So Chelsea were on it from the get-go against Arsenal.
If you're wondering what Battle of the Bridge is, it's Chelsea versus Arsenal. Yeah. Just to fill you in.
That's for our director, wasn't it? Sorry. Yes, so it was very spiteful. It was very intense. It was very physical. Chelsea were on it. I mean, there was one red card and 7 yellow cards, and that kind of sets the tone of what the match was going to be like. This was the red card for Moses Caicedo in the 38th minute. And the fact that Chelsea were then down to 10 men for the rest of that time and Arsenal couldn't really capitalise, couldn't make it count, I think that's what's going to got them most of all this morning. I mean, you shouldn't really complain about a 1-1 draw at Chelsea, but I think they will feel like it was 2 points dropped because of that. That was the first goal. Chelsea, ironically, the irony, scoring from a corner with Chalobah. And then Arsenal, you kind of knew they'd get back in it, and they did through Mikel Merino, who was the guy who had the tackle on 59 minutes. But you thought they might push on from that and do something and get all 3 points because they had the advantage. And Chelsea just didn't let them have the advantage. And afterwards, their manager said, we were better, and he was right.
He was, but that's why I didn't know if it is points dropped. 1-0 down, you take it.
Big week as well. You played Tottenham, and then you played Bayern Munich, and then you played Chelsea all in a week. That's 3 really intense fixtures. It's a good week.
In terms of points dropped, switch to the F1 for us, because...
That means... You know what? That was a catastrophe. McLaren totally in control of this Drivers' Championship. Lando Norris right there, 24 points clear at the top of the table. And they messed up their pit stop strategy so badly. I mean, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but everybody else on that grid seemed to realise that after a crash on lap 7 and the safety car came out, that would be the perfect time to do a pit stop and change tyres. At this track, you are only allowed to do 25 laps on tyres, then you have to change for safety reasons. So that would have made a perfect 25 and 25 job done. They didn't do it for whatever reason, thinking they'd have the advantage later on, and they didn't. And Max Verstappen went on to win that. And it just means that he is right in the conversation now. You know, for the first time since 2010, they have got 3 drivers in the battle for that Formula One championship. And, you know, he's won it 4 times before. You really couldn't rule him out doing it again. But the situation...
It's where we go into the final race next weekend with quite so much jeopardy.
Yeah, it's really rare. I mean, the last time it happened was in 2021, the first time that Verstappen won the world title. You know, that shootout lap with Hamilton, which is very controversial. But Norris 12 clear. If he finishes 3rd, even if Verstappen wins next week, he will be world champion. But what a lot of pressure to pile on those McLaren drivers. They messed up last week. They've messed up this week.
Well,
would you bet your house on it? I don't know.
It sets up a very exciting final race of the season next Sunday.
1 o'clock next
Great
Sunday.
stuff. 1 o'clock, there we go.
We've been asking you since it's finally December to send us your Christmas decoration pics, and we've had some really good ones through. I just want to trot you through a few. Now, this was sent in by a familiar face. Look how cute that is. That is 7-month-old baby Lana's first Christmas tree, and it was sent in by our very own correspondent, Oliver Whitfield Miochich. So, Oliver, thank you so much for sending it through. We love it. We love it. It's
oh my God,
cute.
so sweet. That's definitely our favourite. Sorry to our viewers, but we do love all of yours as well, which have come in. This is a white Christmas household sent in from Shirley, Christopher, and Jamie. Fantastic.
And then I love this, Deck the Halls with Gingerbread Men. Martin Gallimore from Hartlepool sent in his tree. I love the little Santa Claus there.
Got one all the way from Perth, Australia. Angie and David sent us this tree of course, summer over there, but still Christmas. 40-degree
Christmas tree.
Christmas tree heat.
And then look at this one from Cheshire. This is Boo and Margot, and they are looking super festive in their little Christmas jumpers. Thank you. That's Russ and Kate sending that one in as well. Advent calendars are ready as well. Is that bait? Oh no.
Love it. Merry Christmas to everyone that sent those in, and to everyone watching this morning. Thanks for joining us. We're going to take a break here. It'll be Darren McCaffrey up next with the Prime Minister's speech.